Cleveland had been one of the most vital industrial centers of the world. In the 19th century and into the 20th, it was like all of industrial America in one city. I remember reading that at one time, the Cuyahoga Valley was producing 2% of the world's industrial product. The early days of the iron, steel, aluminum, chemical, automotive, aeronautics, and oil industries were all in Cleveland. Standard Oil was formed there. Rockefeller's first refinery was there. John D. is buried in Lakeview Cemetery, as are both sides of my family, who were descended from early English settlers. Some of these forebears had arrived with the first settlements in Jamestown and Plymouth. William Bradford was an ancestor. The Webbs had common ancestry with John Adams, Samuel Adams, and John Quincy Adams. We had Masonic swords and little porcelain statues of Washington and Franklin dressed in their Masonic regalia. Dad, his brother, and their father and grandfather had been Masons. Despite this, it seems they did not get the memo about what was coming. By the early 1970s, the family business, which had once had 80 men, quote, in the shop, was down to one. Ladislaus Horvath, earlier known as Little Laddie, being the son of the elder of the same name who had worked for my grandfather. Laddie, who had been a helicopter mechanic in Vietnam and could do absolutely everything, later told me that he had thought he would go crazy, there having been absolutely nothing even for him to do. The business activity had gone to zero. Under extremely difficult and worsening circumstances, my father had been left without the support of his father and brother, but with full responsibility for everything, which he had never wanted. Stress was slowly killing him. He developed chronic asthma, became depressed and angry, and often stayed in bed. Sometime after my uncle's death, my older brother nearly lost several fingers in the lawnmower. Dad then gave me the job of cutting the lawn. I was happy and proud to be entrusted with such a big job, as indeed it was. I was 9. In the years ahead, I discovered that something in my father necessitated that I be put to work under increasingly unpleasant and even dangerous circumstances. When I was 12, I became seriously ill after being pressed to work when I was already ill. By 13, I was the low man on the totem pole at the shop, as described by one of the guys at my father's funeral. It was hot, dirty, and sometimes quite dangerous. I could easily have lost fingers, my eyesight, or worse. Excelling in school remained a given, but hard labor marked the remainder of boyhood. I recall being tasked with sifting dirt from a gravel pile in the full summer sun and humidity. I was to then use the dirt to fill holes where I had pulled weeds. I was hard at work when Dad came home. Saying nothing, he kicked over the wheelbarrow and threw tools as far as he could. There were tears in his eyes. Knowing that I had done nothing wrong, I don't think I felt afraid so much as something else. It was my father who was in some kind of trouble. I saw him. I think what I felt was an intense need to understand what was happening and why. And so, even though Dad was hard on me, I was perhaps the only person intensely interested in what he had to say. It was the silence and not having things explained that got to me the most. And so I asked questions. He was an intelligent guy, and he had filled his room with stacks and stacks of books. He was trying to understand what was happening, and so was I. Consequently, by the age of 12, I had become a student of the Great Depression and of the mysteries of the Federal Reserve, the quote, Fed. I knew then that the Federal Reserve System had been secretly planned at a meeting on Jekyll Island, that gold owned by the public had been confiscated in the Depression, and that Nixon had recently taken the dollar off the gold standard. Coincidentally, Dad had also been 12 at a traumatic time when, in the March of 1933, they closed the banks and confiscated gold. He was named for his maternal grandfather, who, in the weeks before the Panic of 1907, the crisis atmosphere of which was used to justify the creation of the Federal Reserve System, had been shot from behind, in the neck, in the middle of the night, on the staircase of his home near Euclid Avenue. The murder was never solved. While it had been mentioned in newspapers from New York to Alaska at the time, the history had been kept from my father. Dad went down to the public library and dug into microfiche of these old articles which he'd copied. He showed me a shoebox full of them. His grandfather was described as a wealthy coal operator, quote unquote. I have seen records of his accumulation and sale in 1905 of coal rights on more than 800 acres of Mahoning County, having retained rights to drill through the coal seam for oil, which his descendants theoretically still have. Dad was interested in what had happened on Jekyll Island, so much so that we drove there. I have the postcard with a 1960s-era photograph of a large white building and the inscription, quote, "The Clubhouse," with this further explanation on the obverse. The clubhouse was the heart of interest of the Jekyll Island, Georgia Club during the years 1886 to 1942. This was the most exclusive club in America, known as the Club of Millionaires. Such illustrious names as Astor, Vanderbilt, Morgan, Rockefeller, Baker, and others were found among the club roster. Paul Warburg, a member of the most prominent and ancient German banking family, had led the meeting on Jekyll Island in which the Federal Reserve was planned. He later openly acknowledged that this had been done in secret. Also at that meeting was Colonel Edward M. House, who in subsequent years laid the groundwork for the establishment of the Council on Foreign Relations. In the quiet of Christmas Eve 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was signed into law. The Great War followed by just 7 months. Despite boyhood years of trauma, and perhaps because of them, I went on to do some things. Early childhood formation had saved me from being crushed. This was largely thanks to Grandma Rogers, my mother's mother. She was a Montessori school. By the age of 3, I was sharpening knives and making tea. At night, she sat by my bedside, helping me drift off to sleep. She spoke softly in the darkness, remembering things to me from her childhood and from the Great War. I realized only as an adult that they had been warnings. She had gone with my grandfather into the Great War, she as a nurse and he as a surgeon. They were not yet married. The U.S. had not yet entered the war. Their field hospital in Rowan had 3,000 beds, but the casualties were more than this each day. Even the cooks were attending the wounded. In the darkness at my bedside, she had recalled the sound of the big guns and of the shells exploding, which she could hear from the hospital tents. She and my grandfather were married after the war and honeymooned in Quebec City. They were the same age, 38. She had her first child, my mother, at 42. To have come through so much, to marry, and to have children, it must have seemed a miracle. Grandpa Rogers was named for a cousin who had joined the army to get away from working in his father's shoe store. He ended up at Little Bighorn. Grandpa's grandfather, born in 1816, had also been a surgeon. As a boy, I was allowed to handle his grandfather's surgical kit. It is identical to one in the Gettysburg Museum. Grandpa's great-uncle is buried there. He was a cavalry officer. Surviving 50 engagements, captured when his horse was shot in the head, he later escaped through a swamp, pursued by hounds, from a Confederate prison where the men were dying of starvation and smallpox. My grandfather taught surgery after the war until his untimely death in 1945. We had a chair in the house that someone had given to him. It was explained to me that in the Great Depression, he did surgeries without payment because no one had money. They had a Dutchman living on the 3rd floor of the house. He had lost his job with the factory closures and simply had nowhere else to go. I liked Grandma and often visited her room. She had been born on the Canadian side of the lake in 1883. She told me about riding in a sleigh wrapped in buffalo robes, with bricks warmed in the fireplace under her feet. She had a picture of Queen Elizabeth on the wall in her room. With the lakeside unit, she and Grandpa had met King George and Queen Mary in a reception at Buckingham Palace. I learned about that from a newspaper I found among her things. She somehow conveyed to a small boy that medicine is a profession, as distinguished from pursuits for one's own purposes, and that in the original sense of the word, business is not a profession. I struggled with this last bit for some time, as my dad's family was clearly in business. Nevertheless, I understood that one's work should be about something more than making money. I was welcome in her room. One day I wandered in as she was getting out of the bathtub, and I wondered at the wrinkles. She was unperturbed, completely natural, having a quiet dignity at all times. She died of a series of strokes when I was 7. I did not understand death. half a century later, I came to understand that I had lost then the best friend I would ever have. I would have gladly followed the certainty she had given me, that I should become a physician, as did my brother. However, in the remaining years of my boyhood, the way before me became not only uncertain, it became the unknown. I did not know how to do it, but I needed to somehow understand and get control over what was destroying our lives. I had accepted the burden of my father. We lived in East Cleveland, which was crumbling due to the loss of its industrial base. At about the time of my uncle's death, my older brother and his friends, playing baseball in Forest Hill Park, a former Rockefeller estate, were surrounded by a huge crowd, beaten up, and had their bicycles and baseball mitts stolen. My father reacted to this by pulling him out of the local public school and sending him to a private school. While moving out of East Cleveland was considered, it was not undertaken. So as conditions worsened further, I eventually followed to the same private school some years later. But by this time, the financial resources of the family were running thin. Each summer, the uncertainty of whether or not I could return to school was obliquely made known to me. Being told about bad things did not bother me so much as not being told. I needed to know. The silence was terrible. Life is more difficult if people can't talk. Things go undiscovered or misunderstood. If it is possible to talk, outcomes might be changed. The future might be shaped for the better. The summer before my senior year was particularly uncertain. My mother told me that my dad would not apply for financial assistance. I had no idea if I would be returning to school. But at the end of the summer, I started back to football practice, as no one told me I couldn't. I delivered newspapers before school, worked as a busboy at night and as a janitor on the weekends, drove a delivery truck, and painted houses. I was reading business books and missing no opportunities. Managed to set up an internship in marketing research at a Fortune 500 company. Many years later, after my mother's death, I found a copy of the letter she had sent the school, which had apparently secured my final year. Perhaps due to some embarrassment, this had never been explained to me. Without Mom, I might have suddenly had no recourse but to complete high school in East Cleveland, which was then quite ahead of the times. They already had police and metal detectors in the hallways. When I told my father that I was interested in studying business, he told me that this would not prepare me to do anything, and that I should study engineering. I had, however, observed that the engineers in our family hadn't seemed to fare so well. And so, against my father's advice, I chose to attend a state business school, studying finance and computer science. In my mind, these pursuits were dignified, with the idea that business is the science of meeting unmet human needs, and that this can only be done sustainably if it is done profitably. It later came as a difficult realization for me that people in business have no greater purpose than making money. Nothing else comes close to that, except perhaps being important and sexual escapades. I was an outlier. I was extremely focused on pursuing things I sensed I needed to understand. This gave me an advantage. I would come to know things that others did not know. Coming from a family of engineers and medical people, I then knew nothing about the world of high finance and had no one to guide me. I invested in a subscription to the Wall Street Journal, which in those days was actually a factual business publication. Sometimes I forced myself to go through a stack of them page by page. I noticed the tombstones published to announce major deals. These were somehow important. The firms involved were in New York for the most part. I knew I needed to go there. My wife, Valerie, and I were married 2 weeks after my graduation. 2 weeks after that, I started to work with a computer services firm. I had some experience with programming, and after a further 90-day training program, I chose to go to their office at 44 Wall Street as a technical representative rather than as a salesman. The cost of the monthly rent and train pass were so high, and I was being paid so little that we could not afford a telephone or meet. But over the next year, supporting the sales team, I was able to go into a huge number of entities in New York working with financial information, investment banks, commercial banks, brokerage firms, bond houses, investment partnerships, rating agencies, and even Depository Trust Corp. I was allowed to be there to show them how to get the information they needed and to make it happen. I went to meetings every day and programmed applications late into the night. Eventually, I could see where I was going. Within a year, I somehow talked my way into a mergers and acquisitions group, which was a client. After a series of high-stress interviews, I was told by the head of the group, Mad Dog Jeff Beck, "If you turn out to be a psychopath or a pathological liar, we give you a bonus." Jeff knew of what he spoke. He may not have been the former, but years later he proved to have been struggling with the latter in a big way. Lies are a trap, and perhaps especially to those who tell them. It eventually destroyed him. He once said to me in a self-deprecating way, "You are a real person." The people my age were the son of a billionaire, the daughter of a fantastically wealthy Hong Kong family, and the son of the chairman of a Fortune 500 company. I was allowed to be there for only one reason. I could figure out how to do what needed to be done. There was a bit of pressure. I had been told by a senior vice president, "You better be sure you want to do this, because if you fuck up, you're gone." For the following 5 years, it was a regular occurrence to work 7 days a week and for several days without sleep. Our first child was born. We were then living in Brooklyn Heights in a tiny apartment, just one subway stop from the office at One New York Plaza. If I had been home and had to return to the office, reaching the elevator bank, my heart would start racing because I did not know how many days I would be there without leaving. I thought of it as a crucible. It is through reactions under uncomfortable conditions that one comes to know oneself and others. I had encountered many such reactions and could maintain focus under great pressure and with little sleep. When a headhunter approached me to go work for Ivan Boesky, later dubbed Ivan the Terrible. The starting compensation would have been roughly 10 times what I was being paid at the time. I was considering doing it, but it was not really about the money. Through those years, I was living by Nietzsche's, "That which does not kill me makes me stronger." I was already working around the clock for extreme personalities. Why not do it? I would have been on a 3-man team sitting directly outside of an open window into Boesky's office, through which he could bark orders, but which he could close for his private and sensitive conversations. They wanted me there to do quick break-up models and valuations of big companies, which I was capable of doing overnight. Fortunately for me, that discussion suddenly went cold. He was arrested shortly after that, and so I learned a bit about the lure of money and of being careful about one's choices and associations. We had moved to a big old house in Chatham, New Jersey, and had invited my mother and my wife's mother with her youngest son to move in with us. I was still in survival mode and wanted to take care of everybody. The commute into the city was an hour and a half each way, 3 hours a day. 1/12 of the year was commuting. I made use of that time, but little remained to simply be at home with the family. In 1987, I had an offer to join the Mergers and Acquisitions group at L.F. Rothschild. Instead, I chose to move for half the compensation to a private equity firm. I knew about the agency side of the deal business. I needed to know about the principal side. I also somehow sensed that there would be a crash. 1 month later, on Black Monday, the capital of L.F. Rothschild was wiped out, and the firm soon ceased to exist. I had joined what at the time was the largest private equity firm in the world, having just raised a $1.3 billion fund. That used to be a lot of money. Most of the partners were attorneys and were dependent upon an accounting firm to do their financial analysis. That was amazing to me, as I had experienced that the very process of doing one's own financial analysis is critical to developing an understanding. Within a few weeks, it was noticed that I could find major errors in the financial models done by the accountants. The first year, I managed the acquisition of a long-distance telephone company, building the financial model, designing and running the due diligence, negotiating the financing, and running the legal teams. It was a complex process requiring coordination of hundreds of people. The responsibility for all of this was crushing. The partner on the deal, having a difficult time with stress, went home and stayed in bed for 6 months. Sometimes it was unavoidable that I worked through the night, perhaps sleeping briefly on the floor. More regularly, I took a waiting limousine to our house in Chatham to sleep for a few hours, only to get up again to take the train back into the city. Saturday mornings began with the negotiations at 8 a.m., extending until 3 a.m. Sunday morning, and beginning again at 8 a.m. Sunday morning. This pace went on for 9 months. The due diligence, filling a bank of file cabinets and summarized in a single notebook, was selected to demonstrate the capabilities of the firm to the limited partners. This deal was to produce the largest capital gain in the history of the firm. The, quote, deal books fill a shelf. I signed every document. I was 28. Sometime after that closing, I was called down to the corner office and told that I could do anything at the firm. However, my family was suffering from these many years of my intense focus. The move to the private equity side had only increased the intensity, as I could not escape the encompassing responsibility. Our second child was born in the first months of this deal. I had to be on the telephone outside the delivery room for an hour and a half, handing things off so that I could be with my wife and newborn son for 2 days. Some months after this deal had closed, my wife told me that if she had known that our life would be this way, she would not have signed up for it. This came as quite a blow. I had thought I was a hero to my family. I told her that we could go anywhere and do anything, and got out the road atlas of the U.S. We paged through it state by state, trying to imagine where we could be happy. Ultimately, I simply left the firm and we moved back to Cleveland in an attempt to find a more balanced way of living. We moved to a house built in 1920 in Cleveland Heights. 2 of our children were born in that house. It was within the sound of church bells I remembered from childhood visits at Grandpa Webb's house. The intensity remained. Eventually, I started with partners in a small investment management business. I had developed the view that the public markets offered greater inefficiencies and better opportunities to both buy and sell than the private markets. I knew how to do deep research and analysis. I needed to know how the markets and the broader financial system worked. From the beginning of my involvement, I handled all trading and went on to develop the trading processes, strategies, and teams. At first, I managed long-only equity and then long-short equity. The firm grew from $2 million to $2 billion in assets over 9 years. While it was not then and is not now generally understood, decline in the velocity of money marked the beginning of the Asian financial crisis, eventually leading to the ruble crisis and failure of long-term capital management. Through direct handling of all trading, I could see that something significant had changed in the internals of the market. It was plain to me that this was not just an atmosphere of crisis, but the beginning of a real crisis. Few have the same sense, and this was the cause of conflict within our firm. It is best in a turbulent time to sell the peaks and buy the dips. Some people like to do it the other way around. At about this time, our third child, a pre-reader, picked up the stock listing from the newspaper and exclaimed, "This says oh no!" On Thursday, August 27th, I left with my children for a long weekend canoe trip in Canada, this being our only vacation for the summer of 1998. I called into the office Thursday morning from the canoe livery, and was then without access to telephones. While I was away, instructions were given to remove the entire short position, protecting the hedge fund from loss, and the employees were called together to announce that I would be leaving the firm. This was all unbeknownst to me as I was enjoying a tiny bit of life with my family. Arriving early in the office on Monday, August 31st, I was stunned to learn of what had transpired while I had been in the wilderness. To my further amazement, I was informed that there had been a, quote, palace revolt, and that from that moment going forward, I would have unquestioned, sole responsibility for the hedge fund. Perhaps this was due to the grim fact that all of the hedges had been removed, in combination with the imminent responsibility of a full-blown market crash. This day would see the largest ever point declines in all market indices, other than the Dow 30, which suffered the second highest point decline in history. Our hedge fund would have lost 10% on the day. However, at the open, I shorted the entire value of the fund. Late in the day, I could see sheer panic selling. We were then in a position to buy into the panic. I covered the entire short position at the low. Only through these extremely stressful moves was the fund miraculously protected from loss, ending flat on the day. The Nasdaq Composite finished down 8.6% on the day. At this time, the assets in the hedge fund were approximately $60 million. Over the next 3 years, this grew to more than $1.3 billion. By the late 1990s, I had understood that money creation by central banks was dwarfing real economic activity, and that the actions of the Federal Reserve were determining the direction of financial markets. This was considered to be conspiracy theory at the time, even by my partners. I developed a way to anticipate changes in the direction of the financial markets based on changes in the rate of growth of the money supply. This was being driven by open market operations of the New York Fed. By the time of the dot-com bubble, I knew that the velocity of money had begun collapsing. I saw incredible escalation in money creation engendering little growth. I believed that in some great unfolding over many years, there would be a major depression, and that the only question was whether or not there would be a global war. This was prior to 9/11. I developed a way of using hundreds of carefully selected positions on the short side, dubbed the cream of the crop. Using this system, no one position could hurt us badly, and if I did it right, it would work much better than an index. The long side was more concentrated, although at any moment we typically had on more than 350 positions. Working such a large number required a specially designed trading desk and team technique. We regularly positioned on the other side of trading flows, patiently drawing size to us across the bid-ask spread. Observing and probing this many positions gave us broad, real-time market sensitivity, or quote, granularity. We could move size without moving the market, utilizing available liquidity across many positions. The trading desk functioned as a newsroom, seeing everything as it was released and conducting continuous research. If a position was moving without news, we moved to find out why with urgency. It was necessary to carefully and continuously feed and challenge an integrated model of how the world was working, and of all of our positions. This model was not on paper, it was in my head. This allowed us to act immediately when confronted with significant developments. But it was absolutely vital to focus immediately on any information or development which did not comport with the mental model. When sifting new information, I did not focus so much on things that fit my ideas as on those that did not, that threatened my understanding. The intuitive mind, when adequately and correctly informed, can be miraculously powerful, knowing immediately what the rational mind cannot yet see. On the other hand, if it is given bad information, and if incorrect assumptions are not surfaced and challenged, it is a dysfunctional disaster. The rational mind can be employed to inform the intuitive with vetted information, and to continually test what the intuitive mind thinks it knows. With cooperation between these aspects of the mind, one can drill down to examine detail, zoom out to see bigger implications, and vice versa. Ultimately, deep due diligence requires spelling out one's own assumptions and rigorously testing them. Primary source documents may provide irrefutable information. Biased sources can be used, but one must recognize the bias and account for it in vetting the information. A statement that is consistent with the bias is of little significance. However, something acknowledged which runs counter to the bias is likely factual. To really know something, one must go directly to people with immediate experience of the situation. You can't really know by talking with someone who has only read about it. If I suddenly realized that I needed to know something critical, I sometimes went directly to the airport with just the clothes on my back, flew across the country, and waited for the person with whom I needed to speak, even though I had no meeting scheduled. That actually worked rather well. It helps to hear things directly from people when they are a bit surprised and off script. Dad had told me that understanding terminology is the key to functioning in any field. I had found through my due diligence work that it was possible to become conversant with a surprisingly short period of time, even in technical issues, with leaders in a field. It was done by doing it. After the first conversation, I was better equipped for the second. With each conversation, I was able to better hone in on the substantive questions. By the third conversation, the other person actually became interested in speaking with me because I had just spoken with two people in their field about some interesting issues. And it built from there. I could do this with physicians, chemical engineers, and even neuroscientists. They sometimes asked if I had trained in their field. There was a small medical device company growing at a high rate, on which I had done a great deal of deep due diligence work. We had a large position. It was thinly traded, and so I monitored the situation very carefully. I had a detailed model of the monthly sales ramp built up by the reorder rate at individual hospitals. One day, the company reported sales which missed my projection. They were still growing at a high rate, but in adjusting my model, I could see that the reorder rate must have fallen at some hospital. No one else seemed to have noticed this, and the company was acknowledging no issues. I started cold calling into hospitals. I managed to get an OR nurse on the phone who had just come out of surgery. She told me all about why they had stopped using the device. I knew then that the sales of this company would go to zero. I now had a big problem: how to get everybody out. Not only did the hedge funds have a big position, but also a large number of accounts for individual clients, which I still handled at the time. On top of that, close friends were also heavily in the shares, as well as a school I had supported. It took weeks to patiently work down positions and get everyone out without loss. We handled it all from our trading desk, including coordinating sales for friends and for school. I made sure it was all done. Then the people at our desk could sell their shares. When that was done, the second to last sale was for my mother. The last shares sold were those of my immediate family. I made sure everyone on the desk saw how I had handled it. To front-run your clients and everyone you say you care about, that is trashy. Some people operate with the certainty that they should help themselves first, especially in important matters. I know it is done, but it is something that I would not do. I would not allow it. In the course of this, I flushed out certain institutional brokers at a certain prime broker who had arranged to be secretly copied on my trades and were piggybacking them. I now suspect that toward the end, the prime brokers were allowing traders to front-run my month-end liquidations. We used the entire balance sheet. On days with big market moves, we traded millions of shares and might have gained or lost tens of millions of dollars. Handling this required emotional calm and intense focus. I have told my wife that it was like performance art. The ego clouds judgment, and particularly when much is at stake. I made a practice of focusing outside of myself and of actually placing duty and responsibility to others ahead of my own interests. For me, my work was not about making money. It had to be about more than that, or I could not have carried the immense burden of it all. My clients included a former U.S. Treasury Secretary, a former president of the Network Federal Reserve Bank, and some of the largest institutional investors. People from Switzerland flew into Cleveland. They were trying to understand the secret of how I was doing what I was doing. But there was no secret algorithm. It was a way of thinking. My mother asked what courses I had taken or books I had read to teach me to do what I was doing. I responded, "Mom, there are no books explaining this." Busying oneself with absorbing the pronouncements of media, government officials, business executives, and such mouthpieces creates an illusion of being informed. As Samuel Clemens said, "It's not what you don't know that kills you, it's what you know for sure that isn't so." Through hard experience, I came to know that, while it may be quite difficult to know the truth, it is fairly easy to detect lies. People behave in disappointing ways when large amounts of money or unrestrained ego are involved. With both, there is sure to be trouble. When I discovered that I had been the target of a long-planned betrayal, I was dismayed and chose to begin again. Starting over meant liquidating the hedge funds I had been managing. Between September 1st, 1998 and November 9th, 2002, when I liquidated the funds, the total return on those funds was 258%, net of fees. The gross return was over 320%. In comparison, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ indices had declined over this period, which spanned the extremes of the dot-com bubble and bust. If there were any funds in the world that did as well through this period as did mine, they were few. These results were audited. Further, they were now cash-on-cash returns, and so clients knew them to be absolutely and stunningly real. It's one thing to receive statements. It's quite another to actually have received the funds. One client called immediately and offered to back me with $1 billion, explaining that I then would not need to raise money. It was an extraordinary moment for me. I was hugely flattered, but ended up declining the offer when I learned of a side letter that would have put other clients at a disadvantage. While the dot-com bust was underway, I was asked to meet with George Soros at the offices of Soros Management in New York. I carried into the meeting a single piece of paper. This was a graph showing that the growth rate of U.S. capital spending had blown through 5 standard deviations above the mean, having never in history broken above 3 standard deviations. I explained that this meant there would inevitably be a historic bust. Soros looked closely at the piece of paper, looked up at me and said, "This is good." He studied the paper further, looked up at me again and said, "This is very good." He did not disagree with me about the bust, but said, "They cannot allow the equity culture to fail." I said, "What can they do that they haven't already done?" He said in answer, "You don't know what they can do." So in such a moment, even George Soros spoke of a they. He then smiled and said, "Thank you," meaning this was the end of the meeting. One of his handlers followed me out of the room and said, "How did you do that? I've never seen anyone do that." I was amazed and flattered to have anything to do with George Soros, and that he took me, this kid from Ohio, seriously. He certainly knew a great deal that I did not know. But on the other hand, I knew things he did not know. Early in 2003, I met with him again at his office, showed him a one-page chart of the astounding growth in asset-backed securities, and predicted that this would be the basis for the next bubble and crash. He said, "You're crazy," but he was very interested in how I was doing what I was doing, and I explained it to him. He said, "You have rhythm. Other people can get rhythm too." I started again in January of 2003 with about $300 million in assets and a further $300 million in commitments, taking with me 24 employees, which meant that nobody lost their job due to my departure. Through the peak of the dot-com bubble, I had been able to fight the Fed because I could see the acceleration and deceleration in their liquidity injections. I could already see that there would be another even bigger bust. I felt I had the responsibility to protect people, to keep going, and to do it again. But it would be different this time. The next couple years nearly killed me. The markets had always functioned largely as a closed system, excepting the open market operations of the New York Fed, which I had learned to monitor and interpret. I could see flows from one sector of the market to another. In order for some areas of the financial markets to rise significantly, other sectors were being sold to provide the funds. I looked for opportunities to work opposite to these flows and rotations, buying what others had orders to sell, and selling what others wanted to buy, but drawing them through the bid-ask spread. In March of 2003, I started seeing a phenomenon I had never seen before. On individual days, everything went up, with no apparent source of the fund flows. There was no rotation. All sectors went up, as did bonds. This was not being driven by open market operations because money supply growth was falling. Something unprecedented was happening in the internals of the market. The only explanation was that created money was now being directly injected into the financial markets. I wrote about this at the time. It is not understood even now that this was the actual beginning of quantitative easing, or QE, more than 5 years before it was officially announced during the global financial crisis. I saw it as an act of desperation, and again, felt my responsibility to protect people. Money supply growth was falling sharply. Commercial and industrial loans were falling. I suspected that the growth in asset-backed securities and derivatives was highly unsound, and that inevitably there would be an epic bust. By the end of the year, despite easy availability of credit, signs of economic stress were growing. But people did not understand this, with the exception of those being hurt directly. One could not have known from listening to the media narrative. And if the stock market can be made to go up, people think things must be good. The number of people late in paying their utility bills was increasing. Foreclosures as a percentage of total residential loans outstanding were going straight up to record levels. In the spring of 2004, I was preparing to write about this in my quarterly letter when I found that the DLQTFORE index on the Bloomberg system had been changed to instead show that foreclosures were going straight down. I asked one of the guys on the desk to dig into what had been done to the data series. He called into the agency responsible for the data. Eventually, he was told that while the data series had been calculated consistently in the same way since the 1970s, the methodology had recently been changed, and that this change had been applied retroactively. Indeed, the methodology was now being tweaked with each data release. Doing so made it possible to publish any desired trendline. Post 9/11, other important economic data series were being similarly corrupted to fit the script of economic strength and growing prosperity. An unprecedented level of deliberate government disinformation was being implemented. Having been a God-in-country Republican who had voted for George Bush, I was shaken. Why would our own government work to give the public a false understanding of what was happening? Bush gave a televised speech in a Texas warehouse, standing in front of what appeared to be shipping boxes stamped "Made in America." The image was a fake backdrop, and so it inadvertently symbolized the epic fraud which was being perpetrated. I regularly called business people with insights into the real economy. Some ran industrial businesses. A bankruptcy attorney who had been a friend since we were 12 was handling workouts for one of the biggest middle market lenders. Viewing their database of more than 2,000 middle market companies, he told me the commonality was that they were all shutting down U.S. manufacturing as quickly as possible and outsourcing to China. Tens of percentage points in gross profit could be picked up by doing so. It was about chasing short-term profits, but then you've lost your industrial base and more. In Senate testimony, Alan Greenspan was talking about the productivity miracle supposedly being driven by technology investment. In those days, quote, the maestro was implicitly regarded as possessing superhuman wisdom, which he, of course, used benevolently in his role as the guardian of the U.S. economy. Perhaps then he was smart enough to know that productivity is simply calculated as sales per hours worked. As Fed chairman and as an economist, he must have known that this was being driven by falling hours worked, by people losing their jobs as U.S. manufacturing was being shut down and outsourced, and that spending was only being maintained through massive money creation and debt expansion. People were permitted and invited to go deeper into debt while losing their livelihoods. That was the, quote, miracle. While the tax bases of state and local governments were being gutted, the Fed's monetary policy was inflating a massive bubble in financial assets. In recognition of these two facts, what could the maestro have advocated? If the objective had been to serve the interest of the public, one would have recommended taxing the windfall financial gains that were driven by the monetary policy and cycling the proceeds into fiscal support to communities, which were losing their tax base. The opposite was done. Taxes on dividends and capital gains were cut substantially. State and local governments were forced to increase taxes while cutting services. This deliberate choice would destroy cities, towns, communities, and the people in them. This is why home foreclosures and utility delinquencies were going to record levels. And this is why the calculation of economic data was being changed, including that of the DLQT4 index. What is the job of the Fed chairman? In the case of the maestro, it seems to have been to obfuscate what was really happening. Why would he do that? Answer: the Fed chairman does not work for the public. He works for the people who own and control the Fed. You are not allowed to know who these people are. Why would the people who control the Fed wish to obfuscate what was happening? Now we are getting somewhere. There is something much, much bigger behind this. That's what this book is about. How was debt expanded while credit conditions were deteriorating? It was necessary to create a massive, audacious illusion that there was no risk, specifically that there need be no concern about the ability of borrowers to repay financial obligations. The scheme worked so well that banks discontinued their risk underwriting functions while offering mortgages for more than the purchase price of a home, so that borrowers received cash back at the closing. Loans could even be given to people who were unemployed and had no income, just what was needed. The entire global financial system was moved aggressively to origination and securitization of loans into asset-backed securities and to filling balance sheets with these securities. With the illusion of risk-free return, demand for these asset-backed securities was so high that they were sold many times over on a synthetic basis, i.e. as derivative instruments. There was a Dilbert comic in which the evil Dogbert said, "Prospectus is Latin. It means close your eyes and open your mouth." This was enabled with remarkable sophistry and with credit default obligations, or CDOs. Quote, miracles of modern finance, as Greenspan called them. When questioned about the risk exposures, he said, quote, presumably the risk will be borne by those best able to bear that risk. In laying the groundwork for this, Robert Rubin and Larry Summers had joined Greenspan, billed by Time magazine as the, quote, Three Marketeers, and as the Committee to Save the World. They had presided over the repeal of key sections of the Glass-Steagall Act, which had separated commercial and investment banking since 1933. By 2002, the notional amount of derivatives outstanding had reached twice the size of the global economy. Just 6 years later, it had reached 10 times global GDP. About 10% of this was credit default obligations. CDOs alone had reached the size of global GDP. Invented in the 1990s, asset-backed securities were created by forming a pool of financial obligations, for example, mortgages, credit card receivables, boat loans, etc., and then carving up the pool into a series of tranches with ascending risk ratings. The idea was that any defaults would be absorbed by the lowest rated tranches. This would allow the highest tranche to be rated AAA. But there was a problem. Wall Street had difficulty selling the lower rated tranches, which bore the risk of default. This is why the credit default obligation became so important. It was the linchpin. With a swap of the default risk, the entire pool could be rated AAA. I wondered at the time who in their right mind was signing up to take any of that default risk. Eventually it was possible to know that it had been the biggest banks themselves, and that these had been allowed or directed to form hedge fund subsidiaries. These entities had apparently enthusiastically taken on the default risk, knowing that they would be allowed to use valuation models at year-end showing there was no default risk, based on the simplistic logic that there had never been a default. The general partner of one of these funds would have pocketed 20% of the resulting paper profits each year. This was being done on an enormous scale. With a significant short side on the rising market, we were losing money, but I felt it was my responsibility to continue. I knew that if we could just be positioned when the intervention ran its course, we would be among the very few able to survive the bust. I could see that this coming global collapse would be much bigger than the dot-com bust, and I began to worry that the insolvencies would be so enormous and widespread that the prime brokers, the custodians for our hedge funds, would fail. If you are using shorts, your assets are pledged in a collateral account. There's no way to be hedged without being exposed to the failure of the prime broker. I often awoke in the middle of the night and, knowing that I could not get back to sleep, would simply get up and continue working. I had chronic heartburn, which may lead to esophageal cancer, the disease which killed my father. Like my uncle before me, I was being crushed by my sense of responsibility. Sitting on the trading desk and seeing everything as it happened, I had assembled documentation of the many bizarre disconnects in the media narratives around 9/11, the war on terror, and the economic, quote, recovery. It was the size of a telephone book. I thinned this down to a smaller package, which I used to try to communicate with friends and neighbors. I might as well have been talking to the wall. I needed to understand how to get through to people. Eventually, I went door to door after working all day on the trading desk. People in the wealthy neighborhoods did not want to hear about it. I tried it in a place where the houses were small. I walked past a guy sitting on the front steps of a house. He seemed to be interested in what I might be doing there. I was still in my suit. I gave him the thumbnail summary. He simply said, "Good luck, man," in the voice of someone who had already given up. I decided I could not go on after George Bush, instead of being repudiated, was reelected. I did not think that possible. This is how much I had changed. In desperation, I had voted for John Kerry. I went on to work as a team captain for the Obama campaign. But there was no change coming with Change You Can Believe in Obama, whose cabinet oddly came to conform to the candidate list of Citigroup. After that, I stopped voting. In the aftermath of the global financial crisis, it eventually became known that tens of trillions in losses in derivative positions were housed in the biggest banks, which were then bailed out with newly created money. The prime brokers would have failed, but to prevent that, they were made banks and also received direct injections of created money from the Fed. No one was prosecuted. On the contrary, the perpetrators were rewarded with enormous bonuses. It was almost as if it had all gone according to plan. I had expected widespread failures of financial institutions and had watched closely for the first signs. In 2008, I noticed the failure of a small broker-dealer in Florida, and I was shocked to learn that client assets owned outright with no borrowing against them were swept to the receiver and encumbered in the bankruptcy estate. I had to understand how this could possibly have happened, and eventually uncovered that ownership rights to securities, which had been personal property for 4 centuries, had somehow been subverted. This would be borne out further in the bankruptcies of Lehman Brothers and MF Global. I had owned Swedish government bonds since 2003, but I owned them in the US and therefore had exposure to the failure of the US sub-custodian. I needed to find a way to own them directly in Sweden with property rights. I flew to Stockholm in March of 2009. Without a Swedish personal number, I had to buy an apartment in order to be allowed to open bank accounts. Then it was possible to open a special securities account to which I could transfer my Swedish government bonds and then own them directly. They could not be lost if a custodian became insolvent. This has now been subverted as well. The Swedes were very interested in why I had made the decision to move to Sweden. In April of 2011, I was asked to speak at an investment conference in Stockholm. The title of my presentation was Paradigm Collapse. It was the first time I spoke publicly about the gutting of investor protections, including ownership rights to securities, and of the context for understanding why this was happening. I first spoke publicly in the US about the subversion of property rights to securities at an investment conference in 2012. There was a tremendous response from the audience of some hundreds. When my time was up, there were shouts of, "Let him keep talking!" The organizers said that had never happened before. The conference was politically connected in some way. Their head of research told me that the CIA was certainly there. The next day, there was an article in the online Wall Street Journal rebutting what I had said, but without mentioning me. My dad's cousin was married to a fellow named Bob, who had been in the Office of Strategic Services, the forerunner of the CIA during World War II. They were unusually close members of our family, living next door to my father's brother in Shaker Heights and having every Christmas with us. My cousin, who used to play in their house as a boy, has told me of finding original photographs of German submarine pins and a Japanese military sword. Bob was in Skull and Bones at Yale. His roommate at Yale had been William Bundy, who became an intelligence analyst with the CIA, and is said to have had key roles in planning the Vietnam War in the administrations of both John F. Kennedy and of Lyndon B. Johnson. William's brother, McGeorge Bundy, served as national security advisor to both Kennedy and Johnson. He was on the Council of Foreign Relations at the age of 40. After Bob's wife, my father's cousin, died young of cancer, Bob left a successful career with Cleveland Cliffs and began systematically traveling the world. Dad had said Bob would have soon been made CEO. He kept in touch with our family. He was at our house for a family dinner in 1976. He explained that he had decided to make Rhodesia his base. We asked him why, and he said, "I just like it there." Dad, for some reason, then said openly at the table, "Bob is in the CIA." This was followed by complete silence for some time until Bob began speaking again. Rhodesia became Zimbabwe 3 years later. Members of my wife's family were living there at the time. Less than a month after speaking at that conference in the US, a man contacted me who asked to meet in Stockholm. He had been the chairman of a US political party and had a long career related to the defense establishment. He stayed at a hotel within a short walking distance from my apartment. We had lunch. He suggested a pint of ale. He asked me to explain the subject of which I had spoken at the conference. I went through the evidence and implications. The odd thing is that he then asked no questions about the subject. Instead, he fixed me in the eye and said, "Does your family know you are doing this?" He said nothing more. That was the end of the meeting. I paid the bill and left. Perhaps it had been a courtesy call. We all have to die sometime, and being assassinated must be among the most honorable ways to do it. One must have been doing something right, made a difference. No classier way to die, really. I always wanted to be like John Lennon. I have not wanted to write this book or have anything to do with this, but it has become unavoidable. It is like exorcising a demon which has plagued me and my family. It must be done, and then I will be done. I am self-publishing this because I don't want to involve a lot of people. I just need to get it out. I expect that there will be efforts to criticize me personally and this work. We have been overwhelmed with unpleasant and contradictory media, quote, information. This is by design. It is an intentional strategy, highly effective in shutting down critical thinking. I hope not to add to this burden, and so a goal here is to be focused and concise, so as not to sap the attention of the reader. A further and more important goal is to provide not just information, but a synthesis of key information, allowing the reader to understand what is happening, why it is happening now, and what grand objective stands behind seemingly unrelated developments and events. It is important to note that what is exposed here is not conjecture. It is found in authentic primary source documents in which the planners themselves lay out their plans. I wish to acknowledge the important contribution of my extraordinary friend who found key documentation of the Legal Certainty Group in one of his many sleepless nights. I thank the miraculous people who have helped me and kept me alive. I wish to thank the many, many heroic people working to expose this global takeover, one of whom said, "Wars are not won without courage." You are about to be confronted with quite shocking, depressing material. You don't want to know about this. I don't even want to know about it. Charles Dickens had his character Scrooge, an investment banker, say when faced with his own gravestone, "Are these the shadows of things that will be, or are they shadows of things that may be only? Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends to which if preserved in, they must lead. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with me. Why show me this, if I am past all hope?" It is my hope that in making this unpleasantness explicit, and doing so at this time when developments are becoming more apparent, that awareness might spread, and that the worst might be averted. Perhaps this great taking might not be allowed to happen if we each hold up our end, even the investment bankers, and say forcefully, "We will not allow this. It is a construct. It is not real." David Rogers Webb, Stockholm, Sweden, May 28th, 2023. Chapter 1. Introduction. What is this book about? It is about the taking of collateral. All of it. The endgame of this globally synchronous debt accumulation supercycle. This is being executed by long-planned, intelligent design, the audacity and scope of which is difficult for the mind to encompass. Included are all financial assets, all money on deposit at banks, all stocks and bonds, and hence all underlying property of all public corporations, including all inventories, plant and equipment, land, mineral deposits, inventions, and intellectual property. Privately owned personal and real property financed with any amount of debt will be similarly taken, as will the assets of privately owned businesses, which have been financed with debt. If even partially successful, this will be the greatest conquest and subjugation in world history. We are now living within a hybrid war conducted almost entirely by deception, and thus designed to achieve war aims with little energy input. It is a war of conquest directed not against other nation-states, but against all of humanity. Private, closely held control of all central banks, and hence of all money creation, has allowed a very few people to control all political parties, governments, the intelligence agencies and their myriad front organizations, the armed forces, the police, the major corporations, and of course, the media. These very few people are the prime movers. Their plans are executed over decades. Their control is opaque. When George Soros said to me, "You don't know what they can do," it was these people to whom he referred. Now, to be absolutely clear, it is these very few people who are hidden from you who are behind this war against humanity. You may never know who they are. The people you are allowed to see are hired facemen and facewomen. They are expendable. One might seek comfort in thinking that this must be crazy. Nothing like this has ever happened before. But it has. The precedent for the intent, design, and horrific execution of such a plan can be found by examining the early 20th century, the period of the Great Wars and the Great Depression. The proclaimed Great Reset now in progress, however, includes major innovations, which will allow unprecedented concentration of wealth and of power over humanity through deprivation. How might it come to pass that you will own nothing, as so boldly predicted by the World Economic Forum? It certainly is not about the personal convenience of renting. With the collapse of each financial bubble and the ensuing financial crisis, a story is rolled out which should by now be familiar to you. It goes like this: all of us are at fault. We just wanted too much, and we were living beyond our means. And now our collective greed has caused this terrible global crisis. The authorities, the quote, regulators, had struggled mightily to protect us from our own, quote, animal spirits. Their great and elaborate efforts having been demonstrated through decades of work. Despite their good intentions, however, they failed and can't be blamed or prosecuted for that. After all, we are all to blame. In any case, let's look forward. The financial system must be restarted so that we can provide credit to you again, create jobs, and get the economy growing. Whatever it takes. This time, what it will take is all of your property, or what you thought was your property. Here is your central bank digital currency deposited on your smartphone so that you can buy milk. Noblesse oblige. Money is an extremely efficient control system. People order themselves upon money incentives, and thus difficult, dangerous, and energy-intensive overt physical control need not be employed broadly. But the money control system breaks down at the end of a monetary, quote, supercycle, with collapse in the velocity of money, velocity or VOM. This is a multi-decade process. Velocity is the number of times that a unit of currency is spent to buy goods and services in a period of time. This is measured by comparing the value of all goods and services produced in a period of time, gross domestic product or GDP, with the value of all cash and deposits which can be used nearly as easily as cash, the money supply. Velocity equals GDP divided by the money supply. Thus, velocity times the money supply equals the GDP. Lower velocity results in lower GDP. Milton Friedman was an economist noted for the study of monetary history. In his book, A Monetary History of the United States, 1867 to 1960, co-authored with Anna Schwartz, we find the following observation, quote, "We know enough to demonstrate rather conclusively that velocity of money must have declined sharply from 1880 to World War I. Collapse in VOM is exactly what was unfolding from the 19th century and leading up to the Great War. Within a few years, the Russian, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman empires ceased to exist, as did the Qing dynasty. The German economy was destroyed. Then followed the Great Depression, the Second World War, and the slow collapse of the British Empire. No populations were unscathed. There were no winners. Or were there? While there was widespread deprivation, selected banking interests took the collateral of the thousands of banks which were forced to close, as well as of a great many people and businesses large and small, the indebted. In the US, gold held by the public was confiscated, but most importantly, closely held secretive private control of central banks and money creation was maintained, as was the aforementioned control over society's key institutions, including political parties, governments, intelligence agencies, armed forces, police, major corporations, and the media. The heirs to this control position have known for many decades that such a collapse in VOM would come again. They have been preparing. For them, it is an absolute imperative to remain in control through the collapse and Great Reset. Otherwise, they risk being discovered, investigated, and prosecuted. They are not doing it for us. There is no noble purpose. We are now living within a replay of this monetary phenomenon, i.e. the profound decline in VOM, which began when velocity peaked in 1997. This was coincident with onset of a major global financial crisis, known as the Asian financial crisis, and it was followed within a few years by the dot-com bubble and bust. Throughout this period, I was managing long and short equity hedge funds, and I developed the insight that the Federal Reserve was influencing the direction of financial markets. This was considered conspiracy theory even by my partners. At that time, it was done through open market operations conducted by the New York Fed using repurchase agreements on Treasury securities. I began systematically following the rate of growth in M3, the broadest measure of money at the time, which is no longer published. I studied what was unfolding incrementally, and I saw that in individual weeks, new money created was more than 1% of annual US GDP. This was when it first occurred to me that the Fed was getting less, quote, bang for their buck, in that GDP was not responding to money creation. This meant that the velocity of money was inverting, and that money growth was now much higher than any GDP growth. The money being created was not going into the real economy, but it was driving a financial bubble with no relationship to underlying economic activity. I understood this not with hindsight, but in near real time. If I could know it, Alan Greenspan and the people he worked for knew it too. So why did they do it? If something does not make sense, it is necessary to change one's perspective and aim for a larger understanding. Crises do not occur by accident. They are induced intentionally and used to consolidate power and to put in place provisions for measures that will be used later. By the fourth quarter of 1999, when the dot-com bubble was reaching extremes, I saw that the money supply was being increased at more than a 40% annual rate. I understood then that the velocity of money was collapsing. Such a collapse occurs when the economy is not growing despite very high rates of money creation. Please observe the extremely important chart in Figure 1.1, which was prepared by Hoisington Management. For once, one can see a true underlying determinant of the sweep of history. Figure 1.1 shows the annual velocity of money from 1900 to 2021. With various peaks and troughs, the lowest areas are in 1930 and then in 1946, while it grew until peaking in 1997 and since has declined precipitously and reached the lowest level ever on record in 2021. Profound decline in VOM led to the financial panic of 1907, which was used to justify the establishment of the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve Act was passed by Congress in the quiet days before Christmas 1913. Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated 6 months later. Following a brief recovery in VOM during the Great War, it collapsed further, leading up to the closure of banks and the confiscation of gold in 1933. VOM recovered somewhat into the Second World War and then collapsed to a low in 1946, unprecedented until now. VOM has now contracted to a lower level than at any point during the Great Depression and World Wars. Once the ability to produce growth by printing money has been exhausted, creating more money will not help. It is pushing on a string. The phenomenon is irreversible. And so perhaps the announcement of the Great Reset has been motivated not by global warming or by profound insights into a fourth industrial revolution, but rather by certain knowledge of the collapse of this fundamental monetary phenomenon, the implications of which extend far beyond economics. Something has been planned for us, but not for the reasons you have been given. How might we come to know something about the intentions of the planners? Perhaps by examining their preparations. Chapter 2: Dematerialization. Alright, that's going to be a good place to stop. I hope that got you interested and you want to follow through with this book, because I think there's some really fascinating framings, whether or not you want to take this as all gospel or, if nothing else, as a narrative that kind of makes sense out of a lot of things that don't actually make sense. But there is going to be way more to unpack here, and I hope you stick with this one. Like I said, it'll probably be 4 parts, and we will likely have a interview or a chat episode breaking this up, but I will try to have this out and complete as quickly as I can. And I'm actually also doing a proof listening of the Bushido of Bitcoin, so the audiobook of that should also be done very, very quickly, but I'm kind of doing these both at the same time. And I've got 2 other ones that I'm kind of trying to make progress on as well. So just a whole lot going on. I'm trying to record as much as I can. So hopefully you guys appreciate it. Thank you so much to the Audionauts who support this show. You guys are amazing, and I wish I got to hang out with you guys more. But I will see you in the Keat and Telegram rooms. And a shout out to our amazing sponsors, the Human Rights Foundation and their incredible Financial Freedom Report, which you can subscribe to with a link right down in the show notes. And then the BitKit wallet by Synonym. Self-custody, on-chain, and Lightning. Easy to use, easy to understand. This is the mobile wallet you have been looking for. Check them out. That's BITKIT. Links and details in the show notes. With that, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this and all of the amazing episodes of Bitcoin Audible. This is where you get your degree in Bitcoin awesomeness. I am your professor, and for today, class is dismissed. Until next time, guys, take it easy. When you say that something is impossible, you have made it impossible. Bruce Lee.
Hello everybody, my name is Daniel Prince and I am the host of the Once Bitten podcast. This is a podcast focused on Bitcoin. It's my mission to interview as many people as I can around the different aspects of Bitcoin and help people understand exactly what Bitcoin could mean for them and for their families and for their future. I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you so much for listening.
Hello everybody and welcome to this episode of the Once Bitten podcast. An auspicious day, 22nd of May is the day I am releasing this. Pizza Day. If you don't know what Pizza Day is, don't worry, it's very easy to find out. Just go and Google or ask AI in the spirit of this conversation about Pizza Day and its relevance and why us crazy Bitcoiners pay so much attention to it and celebrate it each year, which is another nod towards the culture that's being kind of built around sound money and everything that we find important, such as this particular day, becoming, maybe one day, who knows, will become a national holiday as we move into that parallel system. And if you're not moving into the parallel system, it's waiting for you. So first up, a few things to say here to Bitcoiners. Are you running a node? Like seriously, if not, why not? please think hard and deep about why you're not running a Bitcoin node. If you are a Bitcoiner, identify as a Bitcoiner, and have been investing in Bitcoin for, over a year, I would say. Now, obviously, the quick kickback answer is always going to be, I'm not technical enough, and I'd rather buy Bitcoin than the Bitcoin node hardware or software development stuff. I don't have the skills. That was me. Believe you me, that was me. But those excuses don't fly, especially not when you've invested so much time, energy, and money into something, and then you're not willing to go that extra mile and protect that investment. Because what's happening at the moment with these upsize wars, Bitcoin's latest infighting, the civil war, the op return war, whatever you want to call it, it's happening, and sitting on the sidelines isn't an option. And running a node is the first step. The second step is to take a look at the arguments on both sides and decide whether you want to run the latest edition of Bitcoin Core or whether you want to run Bitcoin Nuts, which filters a lot of the spam, the JPEGs that are being put onto the blockchain and bloating the blockchain to ridiculous sizes. So it will take you a lot longer to download the Bitcoin blockchain, the initial blockchain download. And there are many of us out there that are not in tune with what's going on, and we don't like what's going on, and the arguments are raging, and they will rage for a while. So I just wanted to bring that up in the introduction here. Bitcoin is money. Use it as money. Laszlo used it as money. He used 10,000 Bitcoin to buy a pizza. So yeah, there's your spoiler alert. Peter's here to talk to us about what he's been up to in his latest project, AI, and it is mind-blowing, and it's great to go down these rabbit holes with Bitcoiners, with people that are spending time in these areas and learning by doing and then sharing as well. I loved it. Thanks for coming on, Pete. Really appreciate everything you've done in the past, are doing right now, and will do in the future for Bitcoin and furthering our education. Make sure you're stacking your sats. You can do that in the US with Swan Bitcoin. Download the app, use the code BITTON, start stacking. Across across Europe, you can use Relay, relai.ch/Bitton. Download the app. That has a wallet built into it. They are your keys. You have to write down the passphrases, keep them safe. That is a self-custodial wallet. It's Lightning enabled. Stack away. You can stack up to 1,000 Swiss per day with Relay, relai.ch/Bitton. Take care of your Bitcoin. Take self-custody. Take it very, very seriously. Get over to bitbox.swiss/Bitton. Brought to you by the Bitbox team. The Bitbox 02 is Bitcoin only hardware. They are going to be sponsoring at Dublin this weekend. We are going to the Dublin event. Really looking forward to seeing the team over there. See if there's any new features, cool features coming out, or just keeping it simple and safe, which is all you need to do. So get over to bitbox.swiss/Bitton. They will also be at Prague. Prague is around the corner. BTC Prague. FOMO in. That's all I can tell you. It's going to be amazing. The lineups are incredible. It's always such a great event. It's the biggest Bitcoin only event in Europe. BTC Prague. The link is in the show notes. You can use the code BITTON to get yourself a 10% discount on those tickets. Then you also have a link to the Riga conference in August and BTC Helsinki as well. That's BTC Hell is also coming at you in August. BITTON is the code. Make sure, please, that you get over to paywithflash.com to go and check out what Pierre and the team are building over there to make it easy for you and your business to accept sats. Zaprite are also doing that. And go and check out Plebeian Market. Support the parallel systems, the structures we are building. Meanwhile, enjoy this one with Pete. All right, Pete, welcome back to the Once Bitten podcast.
Yeah, nice to be back. It's been a couple of years.
It has, and I'm looking forward to hearing about what's changed and what you're up to now. But before we do that, there's usually Lauren here to ask the first question, but you got someone with you to ask the first question.
Yeah, I thought I'd reverse it today. All right, well, okay. Why don't you ask your question, Daniel? I've been telling you about Daniel. He does a lot of homeschooling and different things. So, what's your question?
What type what was it again? What type of world school communities have you gone to?
World school communities, right? Okay. Well, first of all, how old are you?
7?
7. Wow. Okay. You're doing a good job of your questions. Lauren was 9 when she first started asking questions on the podcast. So you're way ahead of the game. You should start your own podcast very soon. Daddy can help you. World school communities. Yeah, good question. There was, I would say the main one we visited is in Spain, and it's in a place called La Heredera, and it's quite uniquely positioned because it's on the south coast there, but they have a lot of campsites. So people who like to world school, some of them like to do it in camper vans, and they would be called overlanders. And this is what Nathan Day and his family did for a couple of years. And they traveled around, well, they went around all over the place in a big camper van. So La Heredera is a good place for camper vans. It's also right on the coast. So they have a port there. And there are families, a world school of families that travel around in boats. They sail around all different countries. So they can pull into that port. And of course, Malaga Airport is only about 45 minutes away. So my family and I, when we were traveling and doing world schooling, we would fly to different places and then use home swaps. We would stay in other people's houses whilst they were on holiday, and they would use our house. So it was a perfect place to attract all of these different types of families. You could have the campers, you could have the cruisers, the families in boats, and you could have people that flew in and flew out. That was a great place because all the kids got to meet each other on the beach. Everybody shared all of their stories. There would be families that would run lessons because perhaps one of the parent would do a photography lesson, or a different parent would do an art lesson, or a different parent would do a math lesson or an English lesson. Sometimes the students would teach, like the 15, 16-year-olds would teach what they were interested in, like musical instruments. There would always be a football meetup or a beach meetup. And it was very, very cool community. And as far as I'm aware, it's still going, and people can just go and visit and go and find the families and hang out with different people.
That sound good? That sound good? We've been talking about maybe trying to do something in Japan, haven't we? We thought that might be good.
Wow.
Yeah, I think trying to get our camper van from Australia to Spain might be be an effort.
That could be. So, do you like going in the camper van when you go on holidays? Yeah.
Yeah. What do you like most about it?
Has Daz been to see you guys yet? Because that's what his family are doing. He's
not yet.
No.
No, he's not made it all the way around Australia yet. He's still halfway.
Is it in the plans? Is he hoping to come and see your part of the world?
He said that he's going to try, but I think we'll see. I think he's kind of playing it by ear as he goes around. It's a long extra stint to get over the west side. So.
Yeah, I'm sure. But there's an example of another family that are doing it and homeschooling, and he's brand new to it, and his 2 boys are learning with him. It's great. It's a great way to learn and spend a lot of time with your family and be in somewhere different.
Okay. All right. No, okay. Right. I think it's time for you to head into bed, and we're going to talk Bitcoin and AI. You know what time it is.
No, it's not.
Bedtime. That's what time it is.
Yeah, okay. I keep the things that you make on the office wall. Go on. All right. Oh yeah, that worked.
Excellent, mate. Thanks for bringing her on, and sorry Lauren wasn't here to have a chat with her. She's out. There's a Sudbury Valley school close by to where we are now, and that's what they've plugged into for like the 3 days a week.
So what's that? A Sudbury Valley school?
Sudbury Valley is self-directed education. Well, it's not even really a school, I suppose. What's the best? It's a big old country building that a lot of homeschoolers and unschoolers and world schoolers have all been attracted to, and there's like 60 kids there of all different ages, and they go along and they do put on some lessons, so they're learning, but otherwise, yeah, they're just there and exploring and doing fun stuff, and yeah, the odd math lesson and English lesson and stuff like that. So that's where she is at the moment. Otherwise, yeah, she would have been here to ask the first question, but such is our geographical separation. We have to do it like my morning or midday and your evening. So,
Yeah.
mate,
Well,
what's been
you've
going on?
certainly you've got me on the sun today.
Yes.
That's good.
What's been going on? Last time we chatted, you come on to talk about you'd been to Prague, right? It was just after you'd
Yeah,
been to
it
Prague,
was after Prague.
right? And then we started talking about the your barefooting. I remember
We
going down
certainly did.
that rabbit hole. That was always fun going down those rabbit holes. And that was when you were on board with Fedi and helping build that out. Obviously, you've got a new project or a new thing on the go now. So, yeah, get us up to speed. What's happened like post Fedi, the interim, and to now?
Yeah, yeah. So I still haven't worn shoes for like a couple of years now, so that's going well.
Is
That's
that all day now? Like,
where I can get away with it. Like
right.
it's like there's a lot of places where it's just a little bit too. I mean, there's places where you're supposed to wear shoes and you just don't because you don't care anymore because you're far enough down the Bitcoin hole that who cares. Um, and then you have the places to wear shoes where like a lot of like restaurants or cafes, they're pretty funny about it because they have restrictions on what they're allowed to do. The government
Well,
says like, okay,
a date night with the missus in a half decent restaurant, I'd assume she'd be like, "Hey, come on."
yeah.
Like,
Oh, well, I've got some like what I have done is bought some of these. I don't know if you've seen like the Rizel shoes. So it's like an all leather shoe, like a copper plug runs through the sole, so you're always ground in, wide toe box sort of thing. I think they're on Noster. Like they seem to be plugged
how
in
do you
into that.
spell it?
Rizel, I think
Yeah.
it's pronounced, but it's Rizal.
Okay.
So
All right.
yeah,
I'll
but they're pretty good. It's like a comfy pair of slippers, but they fit nicely. They just look like a relaxed pair of shoes. So that was my like, all right, well if I get those, then if I have to go somewhere where I need to look like I'm wearing shoes, I can just put those on. But it's still I'm still, true to myself.
good for you, mate. And
Yeah.
what are the benefits, like the continued benefits that you've been getting from barefooting and grounding and all of that stuff?
I mean, the big when I think when we talked about it last time, a lot of it was just like fixing posture and body mechanics and stuff like that. Whereas, when you get busy and you end up sitting down a lot to do work, and there's a treadmill under this sofa at the back there. It's a Murphy sofa that picks up, so I can get on the treadmill and have a walking desk up there. But
Right. Okay.
as but I think yeah, that was the main thing that I got into it, and then like the grounding, like I don't know whether it actually does anything for me, but it feels good to touch the earth, so why not? Like, and it's one of these things that's easy to do, and you think about the logic of it, and you think it is odd that we would have just survived for like millions of years, always touching the earth, and then all of a sudden you could just be like you could be like a 20-year-old guy, you're living in an apartment, and you'd be like, oh, I just don't touch the earth at all, like for a year. Like it's crazy. Like it's weird. So it just seems odd to think. Well, yeah, there might be something in it. There might not be something in it. I don't know. But it's pretty easy. I like being barefoot anyway. It's good for the mechanics. So just go with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, mate, I'm fully on board. Grounding every day. And having listened to a lot of Jack Cruise's talks and podcasts, and the way he describes it, 432 hertz is what the Earth is vibrating at, and that's what we would vibrate at. So it's like, well, that makes a lot of freaking sense. Then he even talks about why your feet sweat, and your feet sweat to increase conductivity with the planet. And yeah, to your point, what the hell were we doing for the other hundreds of thousands of years before? I mean, yes, I suppose you'd have like a thin layer of leather, right? Would have been the original sandal, but that was an organic material, not the rubber we're all wearing now.
Well, that's it. If I try and like wear my, so I've got like barefoot running shoes as well for, because obviously if you just run, sometimes I would run without them, but I would just sort of tear my feet up. But like you put on the barefoot running shoes, if you don't wear socks, like they're awful. Like, you just can't be near them. Whereas like say these Risal shoes that I had, like they're just being all natural. Like you take them off, like you might have sweated in there a bit, and it just smells like a brand new leather shoe. Like there's nothing wrong with it. So, huh, that's good. Like I didn't like the smelly feet aspect of wearing shoes without socks, but this solves it for me, so that's good.
Right, cool. All right, mate. Well, Rizal, yeah, I'll check him out. I'll put the link in the show notes for any of the other rabbit hole dwellers that get lit up by all of these random conversations we end up having. So yeah, get us up to speed then, mate, because Fedi, post Fedi.
Yeah, so I'd moved on from Fedi at the end of 2023, where he was, and then so to 2024, I'd started a new business with a mate of mine over here in Australia called Other Stuff, which is partly inspired by like Noster, where I was like, there's a few different technologies I was interested in, being Bitcoin, AI, and Noster, and started looking into what we were going to do in that space, and we came up with this like the business model that we came up with was like, all right, what we need to do here is find a way of turning like $10 into $50 of Bitcoin. Because what we could sort of see coming down the pike was there was going to be like a big productivity revolution with AI, and it was going to impact all over the place. It was really going to shift how people ran businesses, what those businesses look like, the size of those businesses, where the value goes inside those businesses. And then like to speak to like say Jeff Booth's point, like your capacity to earn money in the future and to keep money that you've previously earned in the past was going to get affected by these things. So we need a sort of model for that. And our model was up, up, down, we called it. And the idea was we need two things to go up and one thing to go down. And this is based around those same sort of technologies. And we said, all right, what we need is margin up, capital up, risk down. Like that's the approach we're going to take. And then what we would do is we would use AI to work with predominantly small business where we were targeting originally, and we'll help you get your margin up. So that's step one, is everybody in a small business for the last sort of 5 years, particularly 20 years probably for the most run, has just been getting hammered by government and just like ripped off left, right, and center and having a hell of a time. Like I actually think AI is going to be great for small business if they can take advantage of it. So we were focused there. So like, okay, well, how do we get margin up on these businesses? When you get margin up, you need to protect yourself from what's coming down the line in sort of 5 to 10 years. So that's where you need to get capital up. So what we need to do once we get the margin up is then start building like the capital reserve. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use Bitcoin, because there's sort of two phases to this AI transformation we could see. And like one was where we are now and all the opportunity we've got. The next one was when everybody's fully adopted AI and everything just is free. to sort of vaguely quote like Jeff Booth. But in between, there's this like horrible transition period where nobody really knows how that plays out. So we think things are going to change. We think they'll be okay afterwards, but the middle bit looks pretty bad. How do you get the money that you've earned now into the future where you're going to need it to rebuild stuff? So that's part of the capital up bit. Then the risk down was looking at like different ways to defend, like to own your distribution, defend that distribution, and various things. And that was like the Noster play that we had in that. So I started like building out that business and working with various different like networks more local in Perth. So I was really keen to like get back into Perth and work here, because it was like one of the things with Eddie is like everything was like out there and global, and it's cool, but like sometimes you just need to be working with people face to face just to get what you need in life. So that was my goal there. And partway through working in that business, I'd met sort of Paul Itoy from Stackwork like a little while ago. Like Fedi had co-sponsored a hackathon on AI back in, I forget the dates right, I think this would have been June 2023. And the Fedi approach to this was very much like, all right, well, I mean, AI, like Bitcoin is brilliant for AI. So they can own Bitcoin, they can't own credit and debt, So it's very likely that AIs end up with Bitcoin. If we give AIs Bitcoin, well, you're probably going to have like 5 billion AIs owning Bitcoin before a billion humans do. If we do that, then we blow out a lot of the scaling problems that we've got at the moment with Lightning. So it's probably good for Fedi. That's kind of the answer there. It's like, let's do that, and then we can drive people into the eCash space. It'd be great. Like, that's one good way of proving it out. Seems to work quite well. For Stackwork, what they were focusing on at the time was like looking. They've got. I mean, you've talked to Paul, right? He's been on the show a few years ago, but they were doing a lot of like workflow automation. So taking like business process outsourcing, breaking down the task into smaller bits, and then either solving that with like a general computer program or paying somebody Bitcoin to move the process along if you got stuck at a point where you couldn't just run a standard computer program. Obviously, what they found is that the more they used like AI inside that workflow system, the more they could replace even the people that they had in there, where they were getting like a few sats here and there to move the process forward. Well, now you can move it forward with an AI. And they'd accidentally built this kind of like, well, not accidentally, but they built this like AI agent framework for completing tasks that also integrated with Bitcoin and humans in the real world, which made it very powerful. So I ended up reaching out to him to see what he was up to. We started having a chat about like where we thought the future of AI was going, and it turned out that we had a very well aligned idea of where this goes and like where the value ends up in the long run, and then how to take advantage of that. And so I thought, right, well, instead of me building a set of technology on my own, like he's very aligned with open source, Stackwork are very open source. So it's like, okay, well, maybe we can just join up. I can help you build what you need to build, and then we'll use it over here, and we'll, go to market at the same time and just work as a partnership. So, yeah, so I started working with Stackwork maybe about in anger, probably about 6 months ago. The conversations been like a few months prior to that. So it's been very good, very interesting.
Mate, awesome. Yeah, shout out to Paul. Very, very interesting guy. And another homeschooler dad that he's been doing that with his sons, I believe, for many, many years. Not exactly sure how old they are, but I ran into him in person finally at the Freedom Forum conference in Oslo. It was great to see him there, and yeah, didn't get nearly enough time to have a chat with him, unfortunately. But yeah, and for those people that are trying to remember where they might have heard that name before, I'm seeing 3 helicopters are about to buzz right over me, so prepare for noise.
Okay.
Such as the dangers of sitting outside in the sun. What the hell? Yeah.
I know what we're talking about. Like, we're
Sphinx
about
chat.
to get shut down. Watch out.
Yeah, this is like something out of Apocalypse Now, right? Yeah, mate, crazy. Yeah, they're Chinooks. 3 Chinooks are about to fly right overhead because we're talking about AI and Bitcoin. Fucking hell, can you hear it yet?
I can't hear anything coming through. Like, the noise cancelling.
Pretty good mic then. Pretty good mic, very local. Yeah, Sphinx Chat was his first thing that they did, which was a very early kind of Noster idea. Right, you must be able to hear that now.
Oh, I can see them in the window, like in the reflection. But
Man, that's great. So yeah, there's excellent alignment there. So the business you were doing, you were talking about margin up, and I'm sure a lot of small business owners. Go back to that bit, Princey. What's he talking about? Margin up. How do we get our margin up? What were you kind of consulting with businesses that explain them? Yeah, just pitch us that.
yeah, so the idea here was that if you got to look at AI and wonder, like, 3 years ago we didn't used to be able to talk to computers, right? Like that wasn't a thing. And then about 2 years ago we could talk to computers, and I think everybody had this like holy fuck moment where we were just like, my god, I can talk to a computer and it understands me and it does stuff and it basically talks back. That's amazing. And then about 20 minutes later, everyone just went, oh, cool, right, we can talk to computers. And I guess nothing's going to happen from that.
And I think the
It's
most
just
mundane, stupid shit.
Yeah, it's like, 10 minutes later, it's like, all right, that's normal. We'll just talk to them. I guess it's just like a useful toy. And you almost like have to catch yourself a little bit and take a step back and go, No, like that's like the thing. That was always the thing was can we talk to the computers? Because computers have been smarter than us and quicker than us at doing intellectual things for years, like in many different disciplines, but they're always like quite tight, narrow disciplines. So like, the calculator's probably better than you at maths and the internet's better than you at remembering facts and various things. So there's ways that we can use computers to just be super intelligent. And the problem we already always had was it only really worked when we were in this really like structured computer world of like if I ask you the right question, you can give me the right answer, but you can't really work in the fuzzy human world of oh, I'm saying this, and what I'm not saying out loud is all the body language and all the context and like all of our shared history and all of this stuff that comes along with what humans say versus what they mean a lot of the time. And like the computers were never very good at that. And I think the thing that we've solved recently in the last couple of years is like computers can now become good at that because we just taught them how to talk using everything that we've written down in the last 10,000 years. And it turns out that everything we wrote down in the last 10,000 years was like all the good ideas we had in the last 10,000 years because we just wrote it all down. Because language is what we use to communicate all this stuff amongst ourselves. So we had this like amazing unlock where suddenly you could talk to the computer. It really is one of those like curve memes where like the grug brain take is, wow, you can talk to the computer, and the big brain take is you can talk to the computer, and everyone else is getting a bit confused in the middle. But it's amazing because it means that now I can effortlessly go from a human's doing something to a computer's doing something and back again. And when the computer does the thing, it's super cheap and quick, and then the human can finish off the bit that it needs to do. And so we looked at this and said, all right, this is going to be huge. Like it's kind of being a little bit underwhelming for people at the moment because everyone's experiencing this as like a chatbot. So the obvious use cases people are looking at are like little chatbots and like how can I put a chatbot in here or do this. But the big unlock is going to be like when we start building this into processes. So I used to do a lot of like lean, like prior to any Bitcoin world back in the day, I used to do a lot of like lean Six Sigma process improvement type work of like, how do you define what's really going on in the process? How do we make it super streamlined? Like, how do we then optimize it? What are the different techniques to do this? And if you take like that sort of view of the world as being like kind of process first, it works very well with computers, like except again at the interfaces between where the computer and the human talk. And that's where you lose a lot of the time and energy. And we thought, well, if we can start to rethink how we run these processes inside businesses. So instead of it being human first, we put the human at the edge. So it's not, I've got a human, I build my org chart for my business, and then I put all the humans in, and then I give the humans tools. We say, right, well, the business is just a set of processes. Let's automate the processes like as far as we can, and then let's bring the humans in when we need to unlock the process or move to the next step, and a computer can't make that decision. And when you take that view and you then like break it down into smaller and smaller parts, so it's very similar to the way you can think about like how Stackwork was doing general business process automation and then dropping humans in. We do, okay, well, we do the same thing. We do the business process automation and we drop the humans in when we need them. And one of the main differences with this, like as these models get better and better, is you need the humans less and less, and you move them out to the edge, and the value of the work they can provide goes down effectively. So, yeah, so that's really what we were doing for Margin Up was to say, okay, well, how can you rethink your business? Because if you're a small business, particularly, like you're already resource constrained, right? You don't have enough people, and the average cost of a next employee in Australia, like minimum all in is probably about 100,000 US, like over here, because the minimum salary is so high. Then you've got all the payroll taxes and everything else that they're going to lump on, and all the super contributions. So if I had a chair that was slowly floating into the air like this, and I just needed it kept on the floor, and I didn't need any other like mental horsepower beyond that, it would cost me $100,000. Like that's minimum entry in Australia. We said, well, there's all of these businesses are resource constrained because of that reason. It's so hard to get the amount of value out of that next hire that people don't do it. So these are the people where we could just take like a process first view of their organization and we can just unlock basically more like cost savings from them and then revenue growth because they're no longer constrained by hiring people. So that was the initial consulting approach. It's not exactly where we're going these days with the stack work business model, but the same like underlying thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Does that track?
Yes, no, it makes complete sense because yeah, it's the same in Europe, and it's even
Yeah.
worse actually because you have on top of that you have the what would you call it, the Employee Protection Act or something like that. So almost impossible to fire now in certain European countries. And what you have now in the UK, like the idea of a 0-hour contract. So you employ someone, but you're not guaranteeing them any hours. And this is the way companies are trying to get around this whole thing. So like the detractors here, and the headlines are going to tell you, oh, AI is going to destroy the workplace and everybody's going to be unemployed, and this is just the worst idea ever. But
Mm.
if you obviously if you think through it from first principles, and so how do you I'm sure you come up against that objection from the haters all the time. How do you try and other than just walk away from them rolling your eyes like I can't be bothered to talk with normies anymore? how would you how would you help someone that was truly interested in trying to grok what's going on with AI and I see it as the release of human potential, and I know Jeff does as well, and so do many others in the Bitcoin space. But yeah, how do you address that particular objection?
I mean, I think there's two ways I would probably talk about it. I mean, one is that I would often be talking to like the business owner, and it's a very different prospect, like an owner of a business using AI to say the employee. So maybe we just take like one at a time. And for the owner, like again, this is somebody that we forget that like, but the person like the entrepreneur that takes the risk of like they put their house on the line, their life on the line, like their kid's future, like there's a lot that goes into taking that risk and starting that business that then guarantees scare quotes like the salary for everybody else in that business. It's obviously never guaranteed. Businesses go bust all the time. Um, and we just dump like more and more like regulation and like nonsense onto them and all these things that just make it harder and harder to actually employ people and give them those salaries. So I think when you talk to somebody like that, like they really are usually up against this problem of like, I could always do more work. Like once you're like a successful like cash flow positive business, your problem isn't generally that you don't know whether you've got a business or not. You know you've got a business. You just can't do it cheap enough, or you can't grow it because there's more people, or the idea of hiring more people to grow it is just a lot of extra risk that is not necessarily the juice isn't always worth the squeeze in that area. So the idea of generally being able to shrink the cost base and then grow the revenues by not having a constraint on humans anymore is just there's no convincing needed. It's like selling Bitcoin to people in the third world. Like they just get it. It's like it's like, do you want the money that nobody can take that doesn't get inflated? Yes, I do. Like, do you want the business where it doesn't cost you as much to run it and you can grow your revenue? And they're like, yes, that's exactly what I would want. How do I do it? So for those guys, it is pretty simple. I do think there's a reasonable concern. Like I'm on the side that says like the future, like after there's been a transition and AI is just everywhere and doing a lot of the work, I think is great, and it does unlock a lot of human potential. Like my worry about that interim transition is probably more about how do people make that switch? Because I think a lot of people, like I used to have like a good, solid, well-paid bullshit job that meant nothing, right? Like we've all had them.
Hmm.
Like this is just classic, you know, slave-minded, way through university and then going and getting the job I thought I was supposed to get, to the point where I feel like I'm now just constantly creating PowerPoint presentations for people and wondering like what I'm doing with my life, right? Like that was like my job previously, and I'm very aware that it was way easier, like the work that I do these days, but it just meant nothing. It wasn't great fun. I think a lot of people have jobs like this. And I think a lot of those jobs are going away. And I think it's going to be hard to transition into a new job because you are going to be competing in a market that now has like a bunch of robots that work all the time, and they are often as smart at you as a lot of your jobs, or somebody else is already using those robots, so they don't need more people. So, so I think that's hard because a lot of the people in the workforce have all taken out this like 30-year leverage bet that like high like 500% leverage, which you wouldn't do that with Bitcoin, but they do it on a house because it's normal. Like it's just everybody just waves this off. And you go like, all right, you've made a bet that your salary will never go down and your house only goes up and that you will always be able to make these repayments. And I think there's just this period of it could be like 5 years, 10 years. I don't it's always hard to guess with the times, but I think a lot of people will become unemployed and then struggle to find employment again over a quick enough period of time that they can retain their mortgages and they don't lose their house. And I think that's a reasonable worry for society. I think the second order consequence of that is that the government decides that they need to print a lot of money and give everybody UBI or try and cancel debts in some way or help with mortgages, or I guess what we've seen a little bit in Australia as well, like, and I think in Europe, was the government coming in on the ownership of the house, which should be like one of the scarier things in the world. Is like, you know what? Like, we don't want that really. That's not great. That just pushes up the price of the houses. Like that's not solving any problems here. We don't need this. But yeah, I could see that being an issue, which again is just like one more reason that you probably want your money in Bitcoin prior to that transition, right? Like there's this transition, and then afterwards there's going to be AIs working in this economy for money. Like, what are those AIs going to earn? Probably Bitcoin, because then they can turn around and use it. So we think that's going to be the money of that period of time. So do you want to own your Bitcoin before the robots all go and buy the Bitcoin? Why not? If you Silicon Valley or
I just lost you there. Yeah, you dropped out. You said Silicon Valley, and then it just suddenly dropped out. So do you remember what you were saying?
Yeah, I'll carry on. So, if you fail to, front run Silicon Valley or Michael Saylor or the US government in buying your Bitcoin, like at least just front run the army of robots that are going to come along and use Bitcoin, right? Because I think there's a reasonable chance that in the future, like where you sit in the hierarchy of whether you work for AI or AI works for you will probably be based on whether you bought your Bitcoin before the AIs did, or whether you're earning your Bitcoin from your AI master that's giving you a task. And this is a thing that happens like now. Like I have AI agents that we've worked on with Stackwork that will pay people to do work, and the work is defined by an AI. Like this is like the Buckminster Fuller thing, right? Like it's the future's here. Like it's not everywhere yet, but it already exists, and AI is already paying people to do stuff with Bitcoin. It's not going to go backwards from there.
Mate, right, to go back to your point about the mortgages and the shift here, the transition, very, very interesting and very pertinent point as well with where we are with central bank digital currencies, because there's the perfect inflection point, right, for the powers that be like the conspiratorial minded people might think, well, AI is being pushed specifically to make more people unemployed, to make them more susceptible, to make them easier to control, to make them accept the universal basic income in a flash, and it's just going to be central bank digital coin. Like in Europe, Lagarde is talking about rolling it out in October. Like this is crazy. And, I hope it completely fails, and like all of the Bitcoiners and everybody else wakes up to it. But yeah, that is a real concern. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what side of the fence I sit on, because go ahead.
I'd take heart. Governments are bad at this stuff.
They truly are. And okay, so Like if they are truly trying to cut costs themselves, which we know they aren't, the blob just needs to keep, evolving and getting bigger and bigger, the insatiable beast. Why wouldn't they be using AI themselves to offset like the ridiculous costs in that thing? But do they care? Or are they just getting...
I mean, I think for government, like, I mean, this is like just Peter pining on stuff here, right? But my view of government spending is a feature, not a bug for the government. Like, they don't think it's bad that they spend trillions of dollars. I think they think, oh, great, I get trillions of dollars I can give to my mates. Like, I think if you look at the world like that, it makes a lot of sense. Like, I mean, it's almost crazy, right? That you would go, like, people. I was thinking about this on a run the other day, and I was like, all right, so let's say I don't know how much Elon Musk is worth these days, but let's say it was like 500 billion. But it might be, might not, who knows? But it would be like that sounds like a lot, right? But then you think, but the U.S. government has got what, like $36 trillion in debt. So, like, even as that, like, as 500 billion's not like it's a chunk of that. It's certainly not most of that. So if he's like the richest person in the world, and there's not many people up there alongside him, then where the hell's the rest of the money? Like, where did it go? Like, is he the richest person, or is there just like tons of other people that are just completely dark in the way that you probably would be if you had that sort of money? You don't need to be in the limelight. Like, you don't need to be the one like under fire from everybody. Like, but there's a lot of money that's unaccounted for. So maybe he's not the richest person in the world, right? You have people would talk about Putin being worth like around about $1 trillion and various things, and I can imagine there's a lot of like just dark money out there where we're encouraged to hate specific rich people but not other people. Yeah, so I could see that being a bit of a problem there, but I don't think it's. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that. I'll cripple at that.
No problem, mate. So to go back to the small to medium sized enterprise business owner, you've helped them get margin up, and then the next bit was capital up. So this is like the orange pill moment, I'm assuming. How were you going through that? Because again, I want to concentrate on people that are going to be in this situation and they can get something out of your conversation here.
Yeah, and I think this is the beauty of a lot of like Bitcoiners. I think me are these sort of high agency people that have their own businesses or are keen to go and acquire businesses and like kind of thinking about this sort of stuff. But the idea here was that what we would term this is something like the value trap, right? Like, so the first question you might ask around like AI and automation is that, like, okay, is there like some sort of technical moat here, which means that only Google can do this and nobody else could do this, and therefore like all the money flows to Google? And I think that the answer is a resounding no. There is no technical moat to this, and that we've seen enough disruption through the various like open source models and the open source agent frameworks and various things that, like, I was able to make primitive versions of this a year ago on my own. Like, and at that point I was like, oh yeah, there's no technical moat here. This is not going to flow up. This is going to flow out, and everybody's going to have access to this sort of stuff. So then you'd say, all right, so then it matters like how quickly you can do this. So you say, if I could take 80% of the cost out of my business, and that sounds like a ridiculous figure, but it's not necessarily if you can automate a lot of the human labor. Like, humans are huge costs in most businesses.
80%.
Yeah, I mean, we could work with 50 if it.
All right,
if
yeah, but I mean, even so, I mean, I can, like, ears are pricking, right, straight away for the business owner.
Yeah, I mean, if you take 80% of the cost out of a business, you vastly change the enterprise value of that business, right? Like, this is why I think things go quick as well, because there's a lot of money to be made with this sort of thing. But if you can do that and take away those costs, then what you realize is that your ability to charge money is going to fall, but it's going to fall slower than your ability to take the money out of the business. So we can imagine a chart and you got like 100 at the top, which is your like revenue base, and your cost base under the revenue is 90. And if the cost drastically falls to, let's say, 20 on here, then all of a sudden you've got this huge profit and it's great. And you've took the gloves off your ability to grow because you're no longer constrained by humans. So now your revenue's going up, like the profits getting even bigger and bigger. And then everybody else in your industry looks around and says, what the fuck have they done? And then within 6 months to a year to 2 years, you just get copied very, very, very quick. And at some point, like your ability to charge and to retain those earnings is going to fall back down to your cost base. And your cost base might be 20% of what it was a few years ago, but you've brought down your revenues. And like what's interesting is you're probably nominally going to bring them down a lot lower. And so your actual nominal profit goes down. So your enterprise value goes down 5 years, 10 years down the line, despite the fact that it shot up initially. So what's really available to people right now is the ability to arbitrage that moment and to say, in this period of transition, there's a short period of time where you can make all of the money and then it just disappears again in the future because it will be competed away because there won't be a technical moat. And that's just going to become more true as more people realize they can just build whatever software they need in the moment, right? Like this is all the gloves are off. Like everything's gonna go away. But that's the key is like, but there's say 3 years here, 3 to 5 years is sort of where I place it. That you can probably make as much money as you can using this sort of strategy and bringing, margin up. And then the defensive thing to do is to say, right, okay, well, everything's going to come back down in price. What I need to do is move the money that I have now into the future. And the best way to do that is Bitcoin. So that's the Bitcoin play at that point is like, look, it's not necessarily about loving Bitcoin. It's not necessarily about like, oh, it's going to be great and it goes to the moon. It's about like, you need to move money from here to there, like 5 to 10 years in the future. And you want to do it in something that you know you're going to be able to control. And you might need to do it in an environment where a lot of people in the country that you're living in have lost jobs. There might be like massive changes to governments. You don't know like who's going to be voted in and have whatever political opinions or political systems in place. You might want to be a little bit more mobile. And again, you look at the whole thing and you go, all right, it's Bitcoin. Like, stop convincing me. Like, that's the answer to this problem of like how you move from like one place to the next place and retain the money. And that's before you even get into the idea of like, well, what's the money that like an AI system is most likely to use?
So now people listening are going to want some examples of businesses that you've managed to help. Like, are we talking about? Because I can't figure out how does that help. A restaurant, a human heavy, because we were in an airport. I can't remember what airport we were recently. Malaga, I think. Yeah, and we were walking through, and we just stopped somewhere to grab a coffee, and I looked over, and I couldn't believe my eyes what I saw. There was the shittest looking robot trolley type thing with a smiley face on, like something like out of some weird Japanese kind of anime or something. I don't know. With a couple of burgers and chips on, and it was skirting its way around the tables. And it got to the table and it beep, 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 enjoy your meal. And the two old people looked at it and just took the plates off. This is dystopic as fuck. I don't ever want an AI waiter or waitress. So yeah, what kind of businesses have you been helping?
So the heuristics we use, I categorize them as like 3 Ls. So we have language, labor, and load, right? So like something like a restaurant is quite like a physical, like lived environment, like heavy sort of business. I think, there's a lot of the back office type stuff you could do in the restaurant, the scheduling, the road ring things. They're going to be, you could take that away, but it's not the core part of the business because it doesn't meet the language and labor sort of components of this, which is, so the language component is really saying like, what does your job look like? Do you work a lot with language, like spoken and typed? Like, does your job take languages as an input and produce languages as an output? A lot of jobs do. Like, not necessarily waiters, not necessarily forklift drivers, not necessarily like plumbers right now. But like a lot of jobs do just take instruction and produce more instruction. Like a lot of those jobs are up for grabs. So that would be like heuristic number one. The second heuristic would be to look at like labor. And we'd say, okay, well, where you've got these like language specific jobs, um, how many sort of people would do that job? Is it one individual and then one other individual does a different job? Or do you have a situation where you might have four people with the same job title in your business? And that's very common. And what you would see is that if somebody's got four individuals with the same job title, then what you know is that, that's not a person, that's a role, that's a set of processes and checklists and, training manuals and various things that you've done to this person to tell them, oh, when you come here and you sit in this chair, you're this, and this looks like that. So do that. Like, don't just be a creative individual in the moment. Like, you're coming here to do this role. And if you've got like that level of definition and standardization, again, like that's something that we can probably replace. So we've got like, is it language heavy? Are there a few of you with the same job title and there's some standardization in the role? And then the next question we would ask is, okay, well, let's say, where does this fit in the bottom line, right? So we've got language heavy roles, multiple people in the role. What does it look like on the bottom line? Is this sort of what, like 50% of your cost base, 20% of your cost base, like 80% of your cost base? And something like a restaurant, it might be that like, yeah, there is language components of this, but it's not really where the cost is in the business. Like the cost bits are the physical bits of actually moving the stuff around. Like that's what you would need to automate there. So we wouldn't look at restaurants to buy and automate here. What we would look at would be something like legal discovery. So you would take an industry like legal discovery and say, well, what you need to do is you need to go and take in 20,000 documents and you need to read them all and you need to categorize them all and you need to lay them all out in a spreadsheet. And then you need to ask like 2,000 questions of those documents. And then you need to categorize all of that. Like that is something that we could just take like 95% of the cost away from now. And that's a high cost item because it's done by junior lawyers. And junior lawyers, despite not really knowing that much, they charged out like a wounded bull. So great industry to focus on. Like a lot of like supplementary accounting and forensic accounting systems as well would be another one. Another one would be we do a lot of work with coding ourselves. Like Startworks is a tech company. We don't actually have developers in house. We use like outsourced developers through the Bounties program, but we do all of our development like AI first. So again, like you can really like drop the costs of website production, like design agencies, like software agencies, like all these costs are going to come crashing down. But these again are like very highly paid individuals. Mm-hmm. So what you want to do is look at, okay, well, where are these particular industries that meet those sort of heuristics, and that's sort of where we can play. And then there's various like technologies you would use in the background for how you do it well versus just having a crack. Yeah, that's how we approach it.
Interesting, because Orange Pill app recently released their wallet, which is a great Lightning wallet, fun to mess around with. We've been doing the Lightning Torch within the app, so there's 15,000 members on that app, and something like 85% of them had never used the Lightning Network before. So now they are, purely because this wallet was launched within the app, and it's incredible. You got geo-zapping function, so I geo-zapped the Bitcoin Alive conference when that was going on with a little message, 21 sats to anyone that was there in Sydney, just to say, look after Canute while he's over in Australia.
Nice.
Great fun. But the reason I'm telling you this is because the developer that Matteo found to make that wallet, he thought it was going to be a real lengthy process, and he was talking to his existing developers about how to do it and how it should work and whatever else. But he found a Bitcoiner that wasn't previously a coder, but now has taught himself how to prompt code, essentially. He's an excellent prompter, so he can prompt the AI to code what he needs, and that's how he built the wallet, which Orange Pill app have been using for the last month or so without bugs. And you're like, wow. So I can I can see exactly where this is going with regards to software development. and exactly what you just said.
I mean, I think it more or less becomes at some point like it's going to become like hyper localized as well. Like I think you end up. This is like one of those areas where I think people get, in my mind, a wrong intuition about AI. Like I think the initial intuition people have is that there's like 1 or 5 AIs that run everything, and it's like at the end of Westworld where there's the big thing that controls everybody. It's like I don't think we go down that route. I think there is no technical moat. There's nothing that like the centralized companies can do that the decentralized open source systems aren't doing a few months later. And the hardware specs of these things are not that high that you can't just like not run it on a couple of Mac Minis, and the new Mac Minis that they brought out will do pretty good response times on these things. And I think it just gets spread out again. I think we just end up with people running more localized models using open source systems, paying for each other with open source money, because it's at some level beyond the no technical mode. Is just we've already had on the planet like one general intelligence, right? Which was humans. And when we had like humans and they became intelligent, we didn't stop and always ask the same guy like the question to go like, all right, like finance, Lynn, you're best at finance. We're just going to ask you. We sort of do that a little bit, if we're honest. But it's not exactly what we do. We just let everybody have a crack at it, and they all work it out, and they'll pay each other money to like ask questions and to do things and to buy information and to trade information. And that's how we work, because it's easier for people to niche down and become specialists in one area of intelligence than it is to do everything in one model. And so I think you're going to see like a lot more like niche implementations of little AIs that are all networked and talk to each other and coordinate amongst each other by buying, selling information, trading things, paying other niche stuff with money. And the way they're going to do that again is with Bitcoin based on the Lightning Network. Like this is where it's all going. And then when we hit scaling limitations of Lightning, we'll use eCash. Like it's all going to be part of the same story. So like we already do it. Like it's good. So I don't see it going backwards.
I think as well for most people that the first touch point, me included, with AI has just been Chat GPT, and my main worry there is Sam Altman, because I think that guy is just whatever. Elon with his Grok 3, I think the same about that guy, and they're clearly trying to, and they throw shade at each other as well, don't they, which is interesting to watch, because they are trying to centralize this idea. They are trying to build the moat, which is unbuildable in your estimation.
I believe so, but it's exactly what you would expect them to do, though, right? Like they have lots of debt, they have lots of investors, they need to return a lot of capital, so they're desperately trying to find the business model around it. Like, so my view is they've got the business model entirely wrong, because they're trying to be a middleman, and I think this destroys middlemen. Like if you give everybody the capacity to understand information, right? So we put the information on the internet, so it's all going to be discoverable at some level, right? So all the information will be out there, and then we're going to give people the ability to have like a friend that they can run like on their own hardware, so they can go and read the internet. Cracking. Sounds really useful. I'd love one of those, right? So if you've got that and you've got access to all the information, well, you can learn whatever you need to learn when you need to use it, when you need to do it. And if there's something that you need to build, and it's, over the last sort of 20 years, a lot of stuff has moved into that digital and software domain. You say, okay, well now if I need to do something with software, well, I can just talk to my mate here and he can build it for me. Why am I going and buying like SaaS systems from Silicon Valley, like over in San Francisco? Like if nothing else, I'm going to talk to the guy. If I can't figure out how to do it myself, I just do it for one. I'll go and talk to the guy down the street whose arse I can kick if I need to get what I need. But why would I ever go all the way around the planet to do this? And you look at like say that SaaS business model, and it was always about, right, we can't build custom software for every single business in the world, but they're probably 60% similar. So let's build the base 60%, and anybody can sign up for it, and we'll have such huge scale that we've got everybody in the world uses this 60% version of what they wanted, where the last 40% is the stuff that really mattered, and then they run all of that part of their business on Excel spreadsheets and like home cooked databases and all sorts of stuff. And it's never really worked, but it was good enough in that model. But if you could just replace the whole thing.
Sorry to jump in. You're probably describing like almost 100% of MicroStrategy's customer base, right? If you think about it,
I mean, the customer base is changed now. I think it's mainly just degenerate gamblers.
Yeah. Well, like the actual customers that they serve, like with their business analytic software.
Yeah.
From what I'm hearing you say, like that can be now done in-house with an AI, and you're not going to have to pay the monthly subscription or the yearly contract or whatever to get that, service from a company like MicroStrategy or Strategy.
I mean, in two ways as well, right? It's not just that the models are good and can actually help you interpret the data. It's that the model can actually build the system that MicroStrategy built. Wow. And then you can run that yourself for
a mic stacking hard.
Yeah, like it's like that's the bit. Like the software isn't going to become software was a moat because you had to invest, hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars of capital in order to get software. This is going to become next to free. Like it's going to become very cheap to get software that you need. And I think when it does that, it commoditizes the whole thing. As soon as it becomes a commodity, it's going to spread out. Everybody's going to be able to do it. So it's...
To work through another example, you said earlier you have people giving AI the prompts, and in some cases you have the AI giving people the prompts. Now that's where a lot of people are going to feel a little of the dystopia. So yeah, just explain what you mean by that. Like, in what position would somebody be taking a prompt from an AI machine, and for what reason?
So it's what you would need. So the way we look at this system is that we've got kind of like 4 tech plays of stack work. Like the first is the AI agent workflow plays, which is like instead of it just being an AI model, you wrap around that AI model like a workflow and a process for how it thinks about the stuff. So you can make it a little bit more intelligent. You can make, a version that thinks about what it does before it does it. You can make a version that does stuff like that sort of thing. That's step 1. The next thing you need to do is you need to give it good memory and access to facts. So AI models themselves are like the confident 10-year-old, where you say like, how much is that car worth? And he just goes, $10 billion. And you're like, why did you say $10 billion? And it goes, I just did. That's an AI model. That's what it'll do. You ask it a question, it'll just tell you something, whether it's right or not, doesn't care. It'll make it up if it needs to. They will do that. What you can do is inject facts into that. So instead of saying like, oh, let's assume that this AI model that read the entire corpus of the internet gets good fact recall from that, let's give it the ability to go read a book and look up what the actual answer is, or go and look on the internet and see what the answer is. Or the way we've done this is we've built like these public and private graph databases that we can use to very accurately look up facts and chain of facts that are related to each other, and then pull those into the AI. And the way that, if you think about that like 10-year-old context, it's like you say, how much is that car worth? And then somebody else just leans in and goes, it's worth 50 grand. And then the confident 10-year-old just goes, it's 50 grand. Because they just repeat what they just said. Like that's what you can do when you give it good memory. So that's often referred to as like RAG, so retrieval augmented generation. We use like graph RAG, which is that with graph databases, which works very well. Gives you great context for stuff. The next thing the AIs need is skills and tools. So they need the ability to go and get some other AI to do something for them, or a computer program to do something for them, or a script to evaluate something. That's all kind of normal stuff. but the last thing you would want if you're running a business is most businesses do stuff in the real world, right? And so stuff needs to happen. So we say, well, where would an AI pay a human? It's like, well, at the point at which I need to move out of a purely virtual world and go and get something done. So I remember at Cheat Code conference in Sydney in when was that, October. I was talking to a guy afterwards about his business, and he was saying like, yeah, we have a business, and what we do is we do all the post-building inspections for various like construction companies around Melbourne, and we would go in and we would, we have a checklist that we're working through. It's pretty, standard stuff. We can train people to do it, but you need to visually inspect the whole thing, and you just mark off what's what. But it feels like with these vision models, you probably do something with this. And it's like, you know what, you could, like, almost what you need is somebody to just walk around, like wave a camera in all the right spots, make sure you get all the angles, that all gets uploaded. We take all the scenes from this stream, we analyze them all, we mark it against the checklist. We could do the whole thing. It sounds complicated, but to run it might be like fractions of a penny versus training somebody up to do this and paying them like, like 100 grand, 200 grand a year to do that job. Big differences. And then you say, well, the bit that remains is the person to go out and put the camera in each of the corners and to film everything. So what's like, do I need a trained person to do that, or do I just need a person? Well, maybe that could become like a bounty. So this is the way we do our coding, like at Stackways. We get to the point where we want somebody to write this out, put it in a PR, test it in their own environment, and then resubmit it back in. And then that can be just bountied out. But instead of them doing all of the work themselves and guessing at what we needed and like what the code was and how it was going to be implemented, we can just give them the completed code and say, look, just run this, check it, and then add the tests and then send it back to us. And you take a job that might have been like a couple of grand down to like $20 because the work's done. They just need to check it. And there's a huge win. But you could do the same business we were just talking about there from Melbourne. You could just get anybody to go and do this. You could get all of the properties done in one day. You don't need to hire somebody, pay them 200 grand, and then now you're fixed to the amount of properties they can get. And you've got a capacity planning problem where you can only do so many a month because you need to be constrained by this person's capacity. All of a sudden, I could have like 200,000 people doing it one day and nobody doing it the next. But these are all individual bounties where somebody just films a route. So like that ability to interact back with the human world is going to be one area where I think AIs will pay humans. And again, like we do this with Stackwork with tests. So one of the first things that we did was to say, all right, we take our entire code base, we put it in this graph, we can see how all the code interacts, we can see where we've got tests and where we don't have tests. We'd love to have more tests. We hit a button and an agent runs, and it says, all right, here's 50 areas of the code that don't have any tests on it right now. I've written, it sends that to another agent. The next agent writes a test for each one of those areas of code. Then it sends to another one, and the next one says, all right, I'm going to price these out and submit them as bounties, and then they all go on the site. And then all of a sudden, like Muggins here gets everybody reaching out, going, oh, can I do that? Can I do that? Because it's $20 just sat on the internet for anybody that wants to do it. And so people just come out of the woodwork in our public sort of bounty hunter network and then get paid $20 to copy and paste the coding, create PR, check it runs okay, adjust one line maybe if they need to, but mostly they don't. And then they just get paid to submit the PR and it comes back in through GitHub. It's like we've integrated to GitHub through humans doing the work and sending it back. Like it's kind of nuts, but it's almost cheaper to do it that way.
Mate, it is, and it's almost, where have you been hiding? Like the people are going to be asking, like, what now? Like, how do they interact with what you're building? Is there an app? Is there a website? What is it called? Is it just called Stackwork? What?
I mean, it is Stackwork. I mean, please do reach out, like say hello, and like, if you've got ideas or businesses or you just want to talk about this. The downside to this, and I feel like I showed a bunch of people the same thing in at Cheat Code when we were there, is we're not really looking to sell this or to consult on this anymore. So like the business model that we've arrived at is that in this future, again, there's no technical mode here. So to create a platform or to sell this as a consulting gig, you just think through it, right? Let's say you've got a business and you're turning over $100 million a year, and I come to you and say, I could reduce your cost base to $20 million a year, and in year one, you will make $70 million, for instance. And you would say, fuck off. Like, no, you can't. That's insane. Right? And then, best case, we enter this like long backwards and forwards in the sales cycle to try and figure out, like, all right, is this real? How do we prove it? What can we do? What can we not do? Like, and we could be like a year and a half down the line, and you agree to give us a go. And like, then the next question would be like, well, how much could you charge for that? You know, we're talking about a system where we could potentially come in and just rip cost out of your business at a level where, like, let's say you made a profit of your $100 million revenue. Let's say you made $10 million of profit a year. Are you going to pay us all 10 in the first year? Do you pay us like on an ongoing basis to do this? Like, it's, you know, like if we extracted like $10 million for that sale, you'd be a great salesman to get that, I think, in that sort of timeline. But you're probably talking about like a year to year and a half, maybe 2 years of sales cycle to actually close out something like that, to then do the work, to then get paid on the back end at some point. And you've got to sit that inside this frame of saying, like, I think this transition happens in 5 years is my guess, and I tend to be a bit optimistic about these things. Like, I think on my bet with Paco, run with Bitcoin, I think I've got like 2 years left for Bitcoin to take over everything in the world. So I might be a tad on the optimistic side. We'll see in 2 years. But so my guess is somewhere between 5 to 10 years is probably the right sort of timescale for this. And you could blow 2 years just trying to sell somebody on a consulting gig for this, to do it that way. So it doesn't necessarily stack up that that's what you would do. But what you would do if you had that business is that you would just do this to your own business all day long, right? So the chosen business model we're looking at is instead of going out and trying to sell this to people, can we just turn up and start to buy strategic like distribution in businesses? So it's no longer a case of like us coming up and saying, can you pay us to do something that you don't necessarily believe in quickly, so that you can then pay us in this complex contracts like down the line? It would be us turning up with Stackwork and saying, okay, can we purchase a controlling interest in your business and get equity in the business? We recognize you're a good business. We'll pay a fair price for the business right now. And our only stipulation really is we're happy for you guys to carry on running it, but we would like to come in and we would like to apply this technology, and we would like to rip the cost out of the business for you and unleash your growth potential so that you can make lots more money, and then we will just share in the upside with you. And we're so confident in the ability to do that we will come in and purchase the business or take a large equity chunk inside it to share in the upside, because we think that's the only way it really works. You need an aligned incentive where the owners of the current owners of the business and you coming in as a transformation agent need to work together. So we kind of term this like transformation-led private equity. It's like, we have a strategy to do this, we've got the technology platform to do this. It only really makes sense if we can all share in the equity upside. To do that, we would need to come to the table. So like, that's where we're at the moment. So
I love that model.
Yeah,
love it. So you then, where are you in this? Are you looking around at businesses to approach?
Yeah, like I probably can't say too much. I don't know exactly how much I can say, so I'll just say there are businesses in due diligence at the moment. Space, so.
And is this, and the beauty of the model is, right, it doesn't have to be, I'm sure you'd love to help Bitcoin only businesses, but the idea being you could help any business and then therefore help them become a Bitcoin business, because they're going to need to follow the what you said, margin up, capital up, and you keep the capital, and that's Bitcoin, and we're all going to share in the spoils. We're going to be around for and we're going to be around for the long term. We're not just coming in looking for an exit on venture capital money or any of that bullshit, or just sell you something that's very cool, mate. It's like, you know, Bitcoin does it every single time. It turns everything on its head, right? It's the complete opposite fiat approach.
Well, it's kind of like the opportunity to get almost like a venture curve return, but on an established cash flow positive brick and mortar style business, right? You could just be like a good engineering firm, and we can rip costs out of your business and get those sort of returns. Like, you could be, as I say, you could be like a forensic accounting firm, and you say, all right, well, if we're the first forensic accounting firm to drop our cost base by 80%, we just win. You'll win everything, and you'll mop up the competition, and then you'll just raise money and do roll-ups across the board, and you just go get everybody, right? Like, it's possible to do these sort of things. And so, I guess like maybe the pitch to like some of the Bitcoiners is, so like, this is a great way of turning like $10 of Bitcoin into $50 of Bitcoin, because there's a play here that would say, like, we already know like how much money this business earns. We know the revenue. It's a business that's been around. It's reasonably predictable revenue into the future. We have contracts in place. Like, we can see what these cash flows are going to be. We know what the recurring is, but we know we can do it at 50% cheaper, 80% cheaper, 20% cheaper, whatever it is. That becomes a very investable thing to go and then put money into, to say, well, you can almost return your entire like purchase of the business within the first year if everything goes to plan. So we assume it doesn't go to plan, but you then get a cash flowing asset that will just produce Bitcoin for you into the future. It's also the version of that business that's most likely to survive this AI transition because it goes first. So that's a huge win as well, right? Like, if you're the one that drops your costs directly before everybody else is going to be catching up. Most people won't catch up. Those businesses will just go out. They just will not be able to compete on price if they carry on in a normal manner. So go first, go hard, buy Bitcoin, like, job done.
Well, I'm thinking of all the listeners that are stuck in their fiat career, right? Sat in the cubicle, just trying to get themselves out. Not necessarily business owners, but just like run-of-the-mill employees, 9-to-5ers. Taking this idea now to the boardroom, to management. You're gonna look like a freaking hero. Like, yeah. By the way, there's an idea out there.
I know you might look like a nutcase.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
The Bitcoin idea, right? Like,
if you're the Bitcoin guy sitting there, and everybody already knows that, I guess you already got a target on your back anyway. So you may as well go out with in flames.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting though is that it's not hard to find somebody in a lot of these businesses that has looked at AI, played with it enough to go, oh fuck, there's a there. This is doing stuff this makes me better at my job. Usually there's at least a few people in there that are secretly using it for everything. Because it makes them much better. It solves all of those awkward conversations where they didn't quite know how something worked, or they needed somebody that they could talk to about it, or they just want to check ideas, or they want to be better at brainstorming. Like, people are using this a lot. There's definitely also just vast swaths of the economy that just don't. They just don't use it at all. And you think, I think that's where the speed of the thing comes from, though, is that it's going to be so easy to compete if you have these superpowers than if you don't. So why wouldn't you just start a business and outcompete the competition with a smaller cost base? Go for it. Let's have more businesses. Let's break the 100,000 person business into the 10,000, into the 1,000, into the 10. Like, let's get back to many more small local businesses all just working with each other and trading. Like, it sounds great.
Yeah. I love it, mate. I love it. Right. Okay. So if people do want to get in touch, what's the best way?
I guess I'm on Twitter, like Pete_win. Obviously Paul Etoy. I think he's just Paul Etoy, ITOI on Twitter as well. Like, he's the CEO of Stackwork, so great person to reach out to. We have like a Stackwork Twitter handle on there, Stackwork, STAKWORK at Stackwork. Noster, I'm on Noster. Feel free to reach out on there. Like, if you sign up for the Sphinx chat app. So if you go to, we run like bounties. So we always have work where, I don't know, plebs love earning Bitcoin KYC free, right? Like, we pay out like tons of KYC for your Bitcoin for tasks like every day. So if you go to community.sphinx.chat, that'll give you the bounty side. It'll talk to all about how you can earn Bitcoin KYC free. So sign up on there. You'll get connected with me on Sphinx Chat. I'll say hello, and we'll go from there.
Excellent, mate. Love it. All right. So if you had one last orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give it to and why?
Last time we talked, I had an answer for this because I remembered that was a question. I just completely forgot on this one. Who would I give it to? Anyone good in Australian? I don't know. Like, in all honesty, I just don't bother orange pilling people anymore. Like, I just talk about Bitcoin. I'm not necessarily private about it. People know that I care about it. If anybody asks what they want, I'll just say, yes, buy as much Bitcoin as you can right now, but, be sensible about it. I will help people. I don't generally orange pill them. So maybe I'd just say, like, I don't know, maybe my brother, something like that. Like, he's never really twigged on it. He's got a bit that he's had for, like, his wedding and stuff. And, like, I think, like, a lot of Bitcoiners, I have, like, my stack plus bits that I've kind of got in mind that it's like, all right, well, if this all works out, then, here's some for you. And then here's the stuff stacked for mum and dad and, like, all of that sort of stuff. But I think in generally just, like, people that you love, like, just get them into it. Like,
Yeah.
don't worry about the haters.
Perfect answer, mate. Perfect answer. Well, thank you so much for coming back on. And this was really interesting. I'm sure a lot of people are going to reach out with more questions, which we didn't get to cover. So, And if you can't reach Pete, reach me, and I'll put you in touch. So there's no excuse.
Oh, fantastic.
Right, take care. Have a good one.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you again, Pete, for coming on, and thank you guys for listening. Thank you for all of the boosts and messages that you send over on Fountain app as well. And if you're not listening on Fountain app, please get over there. Start changing your listening habits and start supporting the parallel economy, because if not you, then who? Certainly not the normies are going to be switching their listening habits to Fountain and supporting that Bitcoin business. So we have to do it. And with our books as well, bitcoinbook.shop/bitten. Stop buying your books from Amazon, especially your Bitcoin or your Bitcoin related books. Get over to bitcoinbook.shop/bitten. Use the code bitten and get 10% discount. And go and check out Plebeian Market. Like I said at the end of the intro, Plebeian Market is brand new. The idea is creators, designers, those kind of people can come together, list their stuff, and they are creating a little economy marketplace over there. And of course, you can pay with sats. Sats preferred as the medium of exchange, of course, because it's the best money. So really, I hope you enjoyed that one with Pete. Reach out to me or to him directly if you want to on Twitter. If you were intrigued by something he had to say there, I certainly was. It's incredible to know there's so much work going on behind the scenes all the time in Bitcoin. We get distracted by looking at the latest argument, obviously the upsize war at the moment, or the number go up. That's always a big distraction. Everybody's really happy looking at that and, trying to dunk on the mainstream economists. I'm all down for that. Please carry on. It's great to see. But behind the scenes, people at work all the time. Builders are building. And, these tools will need to be in place when we do want to just completely move away from this fiat currency system, which has been designed to bleed us dry by a beast that is insatiable. It is insatiable. It wants everything. It will never stop. It will never, ever stop. The only way we stop it is by drawing a line in the sand and stop using its monetary units, the fiat slave tokens, which are just a representation of debt. That's all it is. It's not backed by anything. It's just worthless pieces of paper that we're tricked into using to discharge debt. We're not even, when we pay someone with that fiat currency, we're discharging debt. We're not settling anything. It is just, it's disgusting to think that for those goods and services that somebody has offered their skills up to you, their time, their effort, they've like, maybe you've gone out to and had an incredible meal and you've really enjoyed it, and you pay with fiat. You're just discharging debt. It's just this endless circle of debt. You're not settling anything unless you start using Bitcoin. So start using Bitcoin. Start accepting Bitcoin. Get over to and check out Plebeian Market. Check out Zaprite. Use zaprite.com/bitten. Get $40 off if you want to start accepting and invoicing in Bitcoin. Speak to your local, get to your local events. Get onto Orange Pill app. Go find your local Bitcoiners so you can go out together and start helping businesses understand. I do this all the time. Do you accept Bitcoin? No. Of course they know they don't. I'm like, okay, well, can I just send you some Bitcoin to show you how easy it is? And I'll send them like £1 worth of Bitcoin or €1 or $1, whatever it is, right there in the shop if they're willing, if they're ready and willing, and then boom, there's a touch point. So when I go back the next time, are you still looking at that? Do this with the hairdresser, with the butcher, with the baker, the candlestick maker, whoever it is that you're building a relationship with. Just do this, touch point after touch point after touch point. And then the questions will one day start coming back, and that's when you know they're ready for the next step. When you got companies like Musket in the UK that are building out these point-of-sale machines that can just be plugged straight into these businesses, and this is how we move forward, in my opinion. Bitcoin is a medium of exchange, and it's up to us to push that narrative. It's not even a narrative. It's like it's inevitable. So let's just speed this up and get everybody up to speed as quickly as we can. More education. So go start that podcast. Yes, you that's listening right now, that's got an opinion about this, go start the conversation. Go start a podcast. We need you. Stack sats with Relay across Europe, relai.ch/bitten. Swan in the US, please take self-custody with Bitbox. Paywithflash.com. Get over there. Like I've said, I've been bleating on about Bitcoin becoming a medium exchange. Paywithflash.com is there for you. It's ready. You can just be accepting Bitcoin in the blink of an eye. That is the idea behind paywithflash.com. Set up by Bitcoiners, for Bitcoiners, and for people that want to start accepting Bitcoin but think it's too difficult. It's done. Paywithflash.com. Really appreciate you all listening. I've run out of music. I'll catch you on the next show. And take it easy. Have fun at the conferences if you're traveling. And stay safe. Stack safe. That's it for now.
Welcome to this very special edition of Behind the Podcast. This is Richard Greaser. Joining me today is Tatum Turnup and Rod Palmer. Tatum Turnup is quite the individual. You may know him, or you should know him, as this very autistic guy who wears a bulletproof vest and somehow interviews the biggest names of Bitcoin. He is famous for having been the guy that scared Jack Dorsey away from doing Bitcoin podcasts. Dorsey's done a few podcasts since, but he has not really been on the PodConf Bitcoin podcast tour. You can thank Tatum Turnup for that, for scaring him away. How you doing tonight, Tatum? What's going on?
I'm good. Just getting ready for Vegas and learning now that I'm the reason that Jack has not made his podcast tour. So I wanted to publicly apologize about that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Dorsey, if you know a lot about him, he's an autistic guy as well. And the thing about autists, when it comes to podcasting, is you can't have two autists talking to each other because it's too much.
One of them has to be smart, one of them has to be cool, and I think that we broke that because neither of us, I think he kind of hogged like half smart, half cool, and I just had none. And I think we just kind of broke the system altogether.
I do. Yeah. One question about that, and I think a lot of people are wondering this. Before the Jack Dorsey interview, you were, you're a hard-working Bitcoiner and pleb, but you weren't the type of person somebody would think is going to weigh in one of the very exclusive Jack Dorsey interviews. But you were also a guy who knows how to make a good first impression. And I think maybe that, can you just explain how you got the Jack Dorsey interview that you didn't deserve?
Yeah, absolutely. So on Noster, I DM'd him and said, hey, if I come to Costa Rica, can we do an interview? And he responded simply, yes. And that's how I got the interview.
So being an early, and so we talk about the revolution will not have good UX. And this is before Primal app, right? Like this is when
This was on Damus.
I mean,
this was on Damus, yeah. When it was,
if you think Nostr sucks now, yeah, and you reached out, you said, I'm gonna ask Jack Dorsey to be on my Bitcoin podcast, and it worked. So it's it's actually a pretty good story. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, you can just do things for real. Sometimes they'll respond to you, sometimes they won't. That's also how I got my first guest, Anthony Pompliano. I just asked him on my birthday publicly on Twitter at A Pompliano, do you have something to say to me? And he DM'd me and said, what are you talking about? For some reason, I don't know why he chose to DM me to ask me about that. And I was like,
were you wearing a bulletproof vest when you did this?
I don't even know at the time. I don't think I was. I think that was pre me getting this stupid ass vest. But I told him, hey, it's my birthday. And he responded, happy birthday. And I was like, cool, thanks. By the way, I sent you a media inquiry. And he's like, okay, come to Miami. And so I did. And then Corey Clipston responded to my DM asking to be the first guest as well. And I told him that there was already a first guest. And he promptly blocked me until Pacific Bitcoin 2022.
Sounds like Corey to me. Actually,
I love Corey. I want to go ahead and put it out there for in case this lands on some certain ears. I love Corey. It was a big misunderstanding, but yeah.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, we all love Corey.
Yeah, until he's on my show, and then I'll start shitting on him.
If you're a Bitcoin podcaster, you don't want to burn bridges with Corey because he might hire you someday.
Yeah, I've had to actually decline a few offers from them. They're like, "Damn, dude, this show fucks."
They just weren't willing to pay you enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you were wearing a bulletproof vest in your interview with Pomp, actually.
Yeah. I was when I started filming. I don't remember when that actually entered the scene, though, actually. I remember why I got it. I was watching, like, a music video or something. Something where a guy was wearing a bulletproof vest in a scenario where he definitely did not need it. And I was like, damn, he looks cool as hell. So I went and bought one. And then I got it, and I was like, I don't know when the hell I'm going to use this. And then I got on a call after a work meeting, so I had a button down and tie on. I was like, oh, this would be silly if I put my bulletproof vest over this. And someone got a screenshot, and unfortunately, I'm married to that personality now.
So, are you familiar with the comedian? What's his name? He's Shane Gillis. Are you familiar with Shane Gillis?
Yes.
You know, Shane Gillis, he's got a joke, or he talks about the way he looks and just carries himself. He might get confused for being Down syndrome. Do you think that some of these people saw you walking around Bitcoin conferences dressed like this with your bulletproof vest and think that, this guy's retarded and he's still fucking a Bitcoiner? He's going to start a Bitcoin podcast? Like, good for him. I want to go on this guy's Bitcoin. I want to be his first guest. I want to welcome him to the space. Do you think that maybe that there's just a slight chance that played a part of it?
Yeah, and honestly, when you put it that way, I think that kind of also explains the slowdown. I haven't recorded in a very long time, and I think that it was because people started realizing that I am just, a regular pleb, not a Make-A-Wish kid or anything.
You're not the kind of retarded they thought.
Right,
You're not the kind of retarded they thought. Yeah,
exactly. So I think that they've just kind of stopped.
They couldn't just go on your show and chill.
Yeah.
You would actually ask them, a really dense question, that would fluster them.
Yeah, and I try to. I can't really get out of this hole anymore. I've dug it so deep, and there's no ladder around. So we'll see what happens. Maybe some magic happens when I'm in Vegas, and season 2 gets filmed and gets going. So
yeah, that's a good point. How many years ago was it was like 3 years ago now, the bulletproof vest thing? And how can you go on a podcast without getting asked about it? You're the bulletproof vest guy.
No, it's part of me now.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
There's worse things to be, right? Like, it's worse that it's like Hollow Magoo, who's the Gareth Holloway. They got one thing, and it's embarrassing. But you're just like you said, you saw it one day, and you're like, that dude looks badass. Worst case scenario, you're the badass, bulletproof vest guy.
Yeah, then I put it on and looked in the mirror. And I was like, I don't look near as cool as that guy who was rapping. One day.
Yeah, I have that problem too. I always think I'm going to look as hot as the model, but usually it's like DMX or a basketball player, and I don't look like that.
Yeah.
I'm a cigarette smoker.
So one of the things that I'm really impressed with, probably the most impressive interviewer or guest that you've had on your show is Dennis Porter.
Yeah, I had to pay 3 Bitcoin for that appearance, but
wow,
I think it turned out pretty good.
I'm glad you did, because you in doing so you protected all of our rights. We're all still able to use Bitcoin today because of that donation to Dennis. How did you keep it together in the interview? Like, if I was interviewing Dennis, I'd be so intimidated. So like, you had like the camera shot included your legs. How'd you not get a boner during the interview and have that ruined?
Anti-boner underwear. I have to wear them in all of my interviews. Actually, it's like a hard covering. It's actually pretty painful, but you got to do what you got to do for the content. So,
why did you should be selling these? If people are going to the Bitcoin conference in Vegas, and they're there at any moment, they could run into Dennis Porter or see him, a video of him, and they don't want to just get a boner. Like, if everybody had these boner underwear, I think the cost, you're holding out on us, man.
Yeah, honestly, I've been looking at some redesign, but I think that don't fix what ain't broken. So I might bring some to Vegas. So if you're listening to this and want a pair of anti-boner underwear, come find me and I'll hook you up.
I'm going to hit you up as soon as I hit Vegas, because one of the things I'm really afraid of is I'm going to run into Dennis at the conference. It's going to be a very awkward situation.
Yeah, don't worry. These prevent those awkward situations. Also, I'm working on a line that gives a fake bulge in different sizes. So those are coming soon. Just follow me on Twitter for updates on that.
Do those work? I mean,
No.
do you get girlfriends with those?
No.
Are you single right now? Are you looking for a girlfriend, a Bitcoin girlfriend, or orange pill girlfriend?
Yeah, if you are a woman and understand Bitcoin, please hit me up. Preferably, if we're going to get into specifics, single moms, let's see, redheads. That's really, single redhead moms would be a great marriage of those two. So just hit me up if you match either or both or none of those qualifications, honestly.
Let's hear a pitch. So what's your pitch on why a woman should be your girlfriend?
I can match you on an emotional level. I'm super dramatic. I'm going to cry a lot, even over small inconveniences. I don't bring much to the table. I'm gonna be real. I can lift heavy rocks and put heavy rocks back down.
Yeah. Let me help you out here, because I think you're explaining way more than you have to. I think you need to lean on. You have The thing that most women are looking for is you're tall. You're tall.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Dude, also baby
You gotta
blue
start
eyes.
with that.
I am 6'4", baby blue eyes, and you know what? The big one that
And
I
you're
completely
strong.
missed. There's one that I missed. Forklift certified.
There's another one you missed. Probably the most important one that you missed.
It's not forklift certified.
You're a Bitcoin podcaster.
Oh yeah, I see. Sometimes that's a divisive thing to women.
You don't know your
apparently.
strengths is the problem.
So I need to learn how to leverage it. I think, and you know, honestly,